Today we have witnessed undeniable proof of the strength and the might of the gods we serve. Slain in battle with the dread Umaro, by the grace and mercy of the Nine, the Crusader lives again. How can this be, you ask? What of our foe? What has become of Umaro the Unfeathered? Umaro has been slain by the Crusader. His very spirit cast into the void and destroyed for all eternity. He will never rise again. Let us give thanks to
You know?
the Nine. By their
Knights
power.
of the Nine!
Knights of the Nine is just everything wrong and bad in Oblivion bundled into a concentrated dose of boring, pointless tedium. It's really no wonder I had no desire whatsoever to return to it after I played it the first time back in the day. Just do yourself a favor and skip it unless the items are good for your build or something. And that's it. That's every DLC in Oblivion now covered. And with that, I think we've pretty much covered all of the game content worth discussing. It's hard to believe it, but pretty much the end of the road for Oblivion. I got just one last thing in the hopper to wrap this absurdly long series up, so stick around for that. Do the things or don't, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one where we will finally put Oblivion to bed.
No, there's more. He just keeps the fucking intros and outros in the supercut.
What makes a game fun? What attributes of a game lead to us enjoying
The
it?
video may randomly
What
cut
makes
out, we'll
certain
see.
games stand out so much from the others we played
Hope
that
it doesn't,
our memories
but
of
it
them
might.
endure years and decades after we first played them. What is it about them that brings us back?
It's by private
What
sessions.
exactly is nostalgia?
I'll probably be
and
doing
why
more
is
of his
it so often
videos.
attributed with everything I just asked? These are questions I went into this video series wanting to explore because they and many others are the ones I ask myself a lot when I'm playing Oblivion. I played a decent number of games. Not as many as other problematic but a decent number nonetheless. But there's no mistaking it. Oblivion is really special to me. It holds a sacred place in my heart, a place where no other game has ever been able to find its
I haven't been
identity.
counting. That's
It's not the
been
only
two,
game
right?
so
I think it's been
fondly of,
two.
But I dare say that it is the most flawed of any of the other games that sit on my shelf of legendary greatness. If I'm honest with myself, I'd have to say it is my favorite game of all time. But then I just tore it apart and ragged on it for 6 hours. The only time I stopped complaining really was during a couple of quest chains in one of the expansions. How can I come out of this still saying, yeah, it's my favorite game, totally holds up still? It's because Oblivion is a game of contradictions. I kept repeating phrases like, this didn't mesh with the rest of the game, or this is counter to what we've come to expect, and just other worded differently phrases expressing the same idea. It's the idea that Oblivion just isn't a perfect creation. Just as how Oblivion's dungeons are screwed together like IKEA furniture, so too is the rest of the game.
I've been getting better
The
at
thing remember is
remembering
that this
to
was a massive
hit the
game
thing
by a
every time
very
I kill
small,
him,
tight-knit
but-
team. When you have a project of such massive scope being worked on by such a small team, a large degree of autonomy must be entrusted to each person working on it. This means I doubt that there was a particularly thorough vetting process for what was going in and what was going to be left out, especially when it came to content as opposed to systems and mechanics. I doubt a whole lot got left out for the sake of quality or continuity. They needed as much as they could to fill in such a vast world. I think this is a reading philosophy, but if the player doesn't like the quest, they can ignore it. I I mean, I can't say with any degree of certainty that this truly was the case, but it seems like it's at least a possibility with what we see from the perspective of the final product. Now, why is any of this important? How is that relevant? Well, it just goes to explaining why there is such a range of quality in the content of the game. It explains why we got a guild like
Yeah, okay,
Aegis
it's
while also
not gonna
getting
cut
the
out.
Brotherhood
Cool.
in the same game. It would then go on to explain how we get a game that sort of suffers from an identity crisis in many ways. So, if I'm going to understand what parts of Oblivion I like and why I like them, I gotta first identify just a few of these identities Oblivion tries to wear. Starting with the mechanics, we can see the contradictions of this game already beginning to show, albeit more subtly. The first interactive screen we see in the game is a page full of sliders and selection menus used to create just the appearance of a character. Further down the tutorial segment,
Hi to your phone.
sewers, we get pages upon pages of poorly detailed skills and attributes that,
I'm reading chat
unless
on
we're
my
familiar
phone,
with
so.
the game already, are almost worthless to be presented to us as a choice. As a new player, we'd have no way of really knowing what's good and what's not. This is what resulted in me choosing to play an Imperial with a terrible mix of speechcraft, mercantile, and lockpicking, along with a smattering of magic and combat skills that ensured he would never be effective in combat my first go at this game. I still clocked over 100 hours on my character, though. It's here we see the game presenting us with multitudes of options to tinker with our characters and skills, leading us to think that these choices are critical, seeing as they pop up several times during our first hour of the game, only for the game to then sort of ignore it all until it's time to level up, which we just pick a few attributes to level up and we go back to doing fetch quests. I've made some terrible characters and they played pretty okay compared to some of my most intricate ones. I've made characters that were intended to just break the mechanics of the game, but then I've also accidentally done the same by just doing what came natural to me. Just by sheer ignorance of the totally opaque systems, I was able to break the game, and that could have ruined a lot of the experience had I been a different sort of player, but we'll get back to that. Leveling mechanics and combat are some of Oblivion's weakest parts, but there's also some hint of greatness in there. I actually thoroughly enjoy its leveling and skill system, especially with how we
Make
get
sure to,
create custom classes that really can have an impact on playstyle.
Spam fast
If we, the
forward
player,
every
have the
like
discipline not to resort to these
so often.
This is a game
'Cause
where
you
we
will
have
slowly get
a
desynced.
difficulty slider we can adjust on the fly at any time during gameplay, and that speaks volumes to
So that'll
how
catch you
much
back
this
up.
game requires us to commit to really anything. In the end, it's really up to the player to determine just how much or how little they want to challenge themselves here. That challenge can go all the way to the extreme by either cranking the slider and using our fists, or dropping the
Should do that on
slider to
PC
the
too,
other
like, if
end
you're
and
watching
using
on PC,
powerful
you should
one-handed
reload the
swords
stream
while
every
chugging
so
stack
often.
buff and potions. So, we head into the great unknown of Cyrodiil, fighting bandits on the roads and wandering into whatever dungeons catches our eye. There's a tantalizing feeling from this gameplay loop of exploration, what I consider the secret ingredient to the world feels so open to these sorts of possibilities, even if that feeling is little more than an illusion. Because while exploring the open world with Jeremy Soul's mystical score playing in the background is the absolute height of ecstasy in this game, diving into one of the
does that
dungeons
do it?
that dots the world will have us experience some of the worst parts of Oblivion. In the dungeons, we get subjected to terribly stiff and unengaging
I don't
combat
really.
systems
I've watched
that
like a couple
influence the
YouTube live
meticulous
streams, but it's been
metagaming
a
and
while.
Self-imposed challenges cannot redeem into something rewarding. It's
When I
really
did, it was
very
also
full of
like, you
time
know,
spent wandering
the like 2 view
because
streams.
Bethesda felt the need to create
Those are the
mechanics
best.
and systems to encourage exploration, oblivious to the fact that exploration in the game was what made it so good in the first place. They set about creating things like loot systems and gameplay feedback loops that felt more like cheap gimmicks and slot machines designed to artificially instill tangible value for an experience that otherwise has intrinsic value. That is, exploration is fun for the sake of exploration, and you don't need systems to encourage players to do it. This symbiotic fusion of the best part of Oblivion and the worst part of Oblivion is just so perfect of an exemplar of the game as a whole. A game that just doesn't understand itself. A game that won't ask players to
Interesting.
commit to any style of play, because it itself cannot commit to a certain
I used to watch a lot of
When you have
Twitch,
so
but I
many
haven't
hands in
for
the
a
designer
while.
pot, you're going to have a game with many design philosophies.
Too much stuff
and
I'm doing.
competition. This can end well, which is what I think happened in this case, or it can simply be another disaster. Looking at the world of Oblivion, we see the contradictions do not end.
Like I could listen to a stream or something, but I prefer
We are
stuff like
presented a
this,
world full of
where
unique
like
races and locales and
I don't want to watch someone else doing something. I want to listen to someone
But
talk
then,
about
when it
something.
comes time for any of that to be used, a lot of
Especially
it just
if I'm
goes
gonna be
right out
fucking
the window.
live.
It's substituted for throwaway NPCs, forgettable events, and showy, unimaginative set pieces. Rarely do we come across anyone or anything that introduces a player to the backstory and lore the game is supposed to be built upon. If I was to play the main story, by the end of it, I don't have a clear picture of what Cyrodiil really is. What are its politics?
Like I was gonna I was gonna make like a Google form or something for people to like submit videos for me to play, but I thought about it, and there's a very specific type of video that I want to listen to.
We got human folk, elven folk, and beast folk. They all kind of seem the same though. Nords like snow. I know
So I don't think that would really work.
Because you talk in the third person, that's pretty neat. Read the books and pay really close attention when doing side content, and you might pick up on some of the lore, but good luck. So, we have a world that is wonderfully fascinating on the wiki. In game,
Oh yeah, I mostly
world
use this
that
background noise. I
more
just use
often
other
than not
stuff now.
substitutes thought-provoking dialogue and quests for bland utilitarian info dumps and showy set pieces. Those set pieces are
Because
interesting
Twitch is
because they
like
not only contribute to
inconsistently
fun
good
and
as
some lore,
background noise,
but
and
they
also
contribute to the
requires
presentation of the game.
maintenance. Like, oh, I'm ending stream and now I've rated this like annoying
Very
retard. Oh, okay.
colorful, but everything about its presentation, down to the
You know?
soundtrack itself, is neutral. That's not a bad thing or a good thing. It's just a fact. But what is also a fact is that the set pieces
Stuff like this.
elicit in us emotions. They are designed to make us think and feel a certain way.
I might do some Wendigoon videos.
I've
I've been thinking about doing that.
Tries to do. This is one of my favorite contradictions because it's obviously spent a huge amount of time and resources trying to build those set pieces, only for them to fall flat for players like me coming into this world to explore it on our own terms. Exploring on our own terms is something worth discussing too, because when we are free to wander the world, we are guided by little more than level design cues and compass markers. The rest is up to us to decide and ponder over. But once we got quests, well, then we get quest markers that hold our hands to the point of railroading us. Few dialogue choices, and NPC dialogue that all but spells out exactly what needs to be done. As though the objective of going
But
to
there's a lot of
dungeon and
videos
all the
like
enemies
this
inside
that
needs
I can
much
go
exploring.
through.
We get some of the most freedom the game can possibly
That's what I have been
deliver,
doing,
and some of the
so
most
I figure,
restrictive designs
at least on
that
stream,
come
I
with this
might as well
open world
continue.
RPG. I might even set a toe into the simulation side of world design.
It works pretty well, I
to a
think.
straight-jacketed,
'Cause, like,
low-budget
nobody really
amusement
cares.
park ride. It's funny and
But
sad
it's
because
decent
The
background
Division
noise.
has got to be one of the most immersive games I've ever played. But like with every other aspect of this game,
Oh,
it's
well,
also
you
one
could,
of the
like,
least
just DM
immersive
them to
games I've
me.
ever played. When I'm left to wander the world once again, beginning to pick my destination and allowing the camera to slot through me, I'm transfixed in a way so few games even today manage to achieve. No map markers, no to-do lists cluttering my HUD, just the natural worlds, my character.
I almost missed it. Look at that. It was hiding.
Weather changes, birds sing in the forest, insects chirp at night.
Yeah, it's basically Zoomer bait, but it's just for me.
But then we
But,
come across things that
it's
break
funny
immersion
to have
quicker than
it so
duplicating
you guys can
watermelons
watch
breaks
it.
the game engine.
This one
Enemies
sucks.
ragdoll in weird ways as they fail to react to my weapon swings. My character can moonwalk strafe when running at certain angles. NPCs start having repeating conversations. NPCs stand in their empty shops servicing no one but somehow still remaining in business, and on I can go. A lot of this actually ends up emerging when we enter cities and try to interact with NPCs in general. A big culprit ends up being Radiant AI, a system that was explicitly designed to enhance player immersion. A system
Oh, fuck.
designed to make the player feel like they are just an independent part
I don't
of
think
the
that's true. I don't
world,
talk very much.
reveals that NPCs are just window dressing for a player-centric experience. You can't find a more poetic contradiction than that. Moving into story and content, we will constantly find player-centrism at war with a player-agnostic world. Take the story, for example. In the beginning, we are told by the Emperor himself that we are the chosen ones from his dream, destined to stop the Oblivion invasion. He cannot stop talking about how everything we have experienced, are experiencing, and will experience has been preordained by the gods.
I mean, I'll talk if you talk to
Then we
me,
meet
but
Martin, and that sort of goes out the window.
yeah,
We,
if I'm just
while still
streaming
being an
0
unstoppable
viewers,
will of
there's
destiny
also
by
0
following
talking.
the antagonist's plans time and again,
Maybe if something
And
super
are being
notable happens,
sidelined
because
for
I
a
do
more
just talk to
grounded
myself
story where we are only helping Martin
sometimes.
achieve
I can play that up a
his
little bit
destiny.
for stream, but
We start to act as an agent in the world as opposed to the world
not if
acting as our
like,
playground, at least in terms of story.
yeah, not
This ends up
consistently for
creating
sure.
some serious dissonance between what we are experiencing and what we are meant to do with that story. We are meant to believe we are now just the hero meant to help save the world. But aside from a couple of instances where we are fighting alongside NPCs, everything that has happened in the story has been as a direct result of our actions exclusively. To have it change that story tone, but not so much reflected in gameplay, leads to not only story collapse, but dissonance at the same time, resulting in a really unsatisfying...
See, I think you just like talking to me.
And then we move into some of the guilds, where we are treated throughout the entire experience as some dumb lackey or intern who can only be trusted with tasks our superiors insist are beneath them. Slowly, those stories progress to ratchet up the stakes, and while we are still given the tasks of sort of...
I don't tend to talk to myself out loud like when I'm playing games, but I do talk to myself like sometimes, just randomly, especially when I'm not sober.
Where we are suddenly handed the keys to the highest office as some token reward for having stuck with the quest chain to the end. We don't grow into those positions, we are just given them like we are given the robes that represent said office, leading to the immediate
And I,
cheapening
you know,
of the
tend to
entire
not be,
experience
so.
when the highest office and the lowest rank both net the player the same flat feeling. The better guilds avoid this trap by having us work towards those higher offices in some capacity. We earn our ways to those offices as opposed to enduring our ways there. They still fall short of making those final positions feel meaningful in gameplay, but at least in terms of story, they give some sense of satisfaction. What is the point of all this? Are we meant to feel inspired? Are we meant to feel wiser? Are we meant to feel satisfied? Or are we meant to just feel nothing at all?
I might just start streaming when I play like most games though, because might as well. It's fun.
It's meant to feel wiser, then the lack of lore and meaningful exposition fails that. If we are meant to feel satisfied, then, well, all of the above has failed that. The neutral option seems to be the only valid explanation, but then we are given ham-fisted stories with NPCs that sacrifice themselves for something.
There was no point in
or we see a city get
streaming
destroyed,
anything
or
that
we are
wasn't
forced to
GD
kill
when I
villagers while hiding drugs. If we
I used to
aren't
stream
meant
on
feel
Twitch,
anything at all, or are meant to feel
and my
nothing,
YouTube channel was like tiny,
why do we have
so there was
all
no real
these set
point
pieces
then.
where the designers grab the camera and go,
But
"Look," and
there kind of is now.
it's because Bethesda probably didn't consider what sort of overall
And also I,
experience
you
these
know,
pieces created. Even
it does
within
help
the
that I
confines of
have
those
like you and a
pieces, we see
couple other
conflict
people that
emerge.
just know me that
What
come
this
into
ends
my
up doing
chat.
is allowing
So
us to collect titles like we collect weapons and armor. We can wander the world as something close to an emperor and still get accosted by guards because we grabbed a bottle of ale. We can be the Grey Fox and the listener of the Dark Brotherhood and still get ambushed by independent highwaymen and assassins on the roads of Cyrodiil. But what's the purpose of these titles if they don't impact how the world reacts to us? Why is the game trying to tell us to live like an ordinary person, but then have us do extraordinary things, only to have NPCs downplay those extraordinary things until they have to recognize us as their superiors? Why are we led to think we are growing from just a humble prisoner to a literal demigod, when the game is also trying to beat down our growing ego with goblins who can still tear us to pieces just as badly as they could with the Game of Sewers? This all leads to the greatest contradiction of all in this game: player empowerment versus player freedom. And this is the real head scratcher. How the hell did this get so fucked? Quite simple, really. Level scaling. We level up, get more powerful, so does the rest of the world. At no point are we ever allowed to experience steamrolling enemies in this game, or even laughing off
well, I kind of cheated, so you know.
If we want that experience, we have to turn the difficulty slider down.
And got lucky.
This
That's
was all
important.
done to surface accessibility and player freedom. They didn't want to tell the players that they couldn't travel to that mountain in the distance and go into the cave over there. They wanted as much freedom as possible, but what ends up getting sacrificed is the satisfaction of the entire experience. They tried to save the experience by sacrificing the experience. This is the problem with not addressing key game design questions, and not following through with a clear vision. Why
So
does a
the,
game about growing and progressing have no
I joined a
progression?
like
Why does a game about living
like an
ordinary
impossible
life have
levels
to
of
play
server.
between the literal center of its world? Why does a
Got
game
list
about
mod of
immersion
it.
have so much that shatters that immersion?
This wasn't like
Why does a game
intentional, but
with
it
a
did
story
happen.
about the player
Um,
being the destined savior have
I
so much
figured
that it's
out
becoming the savior? Why does a game that
in
tries
like
to be
staff
as
chat there
neutral as
was
possible
a
try to dictate what we should be feeling during every
guideline for like for replacing showcases on the list. Also, I just in general, I made a bunch of showcases for the list before I did this. I made like 5 or 6 or something, and a lot of those got a bunch of views. That was luck. But I got also a bunch of views from
because despite all those faults,
I replaced like
it's still a fun game.
70 to 80 showcases on the list that just weren't 4K.
Oblivion is a game that cannot hide its behind. Many of them are just
And doing all of that basically kickstarted my channel into actually growing.
It's not a game that wears those faults proudly. It can best be described as a garage band composed of a bunch of young music enthusiasts. It's a cobbled together amalgamation of all different ideas of all different people who have slightly different thoughts on what an RPG
This looked like a week.
game is. Sometimes unions like that can make truly unique and wonderful things. It's almost always by accident, and it's basically impossible for it to be a well-polished product, but this is what produces a diamond in the rough. And that's what Oblivion is, a gem embedded in quite a bit of rock. If a player is willing to...
It's not cheating, but it's
an immersive
it's not exactly natural
game
growth
with
either.
a character
That's what I
progression
meant.
system that can still be fun and rewarding when it's not obtuse and being muted by aggressive level scaling. Some good quests, if the bad, are avoided, and one hell of a fun sandbox to mess with. Thanks to the latest
Also,
systems
I
of
don't even call it
Oblivion,
good
you can find all
content.
sorts of weird
I don't know what
aggressive
you're on about.
interactions between them that never gets old
Some
or
of it's good.
experimental.
Most of it's filler.
This can lead to the game breaking at times, but that's what saving and reloading is for. The complexity of this game's sandbox is really quite something, even by today's standards. The spell-making and enchanting systems alone can make for some very interesting times. Couple them with some unique Daedric artifacts, and you got how many afternoons...
Maybe not
you spent
filler. It's just not very like
People
hard.
bring up bugs a lot, and always seem to lump all of them together, but not all bugs are created. It's game dependent, but in games like Oblivion, where even if the bugs were all gone, just the fundamental design philosophy would be enough to prevent me from ever being
Yeah, it's
fully
just not
immersed in this world 100%
hard to
most of the
do.
time. What difference does it make if I can stop mid-air by just blocking with my dagger? Is that really so game-breaking that it would need to be patched out? I don't think so, and because of that, it just adds another layer to
This
this
is true.
already complex meshwork
Well,
of mechanics and content.
You know,
This is a game
550 plus people agree with you
in the middle of a boss
for some reason,
Do
so.
you really need to patch out all the item duplication methods? I already need to possess some degree of discipline to keep my hands away from that slider. So it stands to reason I can keep myself from duplicating all the lockpicks, repair hammers, and soul gems if I want to. Maybe that's exactly what I do want to do, in which case, hey, the option is still there. It's great to play extremely well-polished games with a cohesive vision applied to every aspect of its design. And sometimes it's fun to just play something that can't help but wear its jankiness on its sleeve. What's charming about Oblivion is that it's clearly a work of passion. You can see so many
I make
examples of the
videos that
personality of
12-year-olds
the
enjoy.
developer through. But when you start to see the scenes, you start to see that this is something made by people, flaws and all. Sometimes that can create
And there's a
personal
lot of them. It's
connection
not a diss
with
on
the
you.
player of the game. The game was a canvas for the designers to express
But it is
themselves,
true.
and this game is a sandbox for me as a player to express myself. There's a certain understated beauty in that dual purpose. I'm not trying to make an argument for developers to release bug
Other people also enjoyed them. It's just that also 12-year-olds enjoy them, and there's a fucking lot of those. You know, by 12-year-olds I mean like, you know, 12 to like 15. That's a lot of YouTube.
They were trying a lot of new things with this game, though, and it certainly
Especially
wasn't like anything
Geometry
they'd done
Dash.
up until that point back in
It's like
2006.
most of Geometry Dash
Maybe
YouTube.
that's one of the reasons I couldn't decide.
People
I
watching
know
it anyway.
much less forgiving with Skyrim and the Fallout games because what we were left with was just as many bugs, but substantially less innovation. Another component is, of course, nostalgia. There's no denying the good old rose-tinted glasses aren't at work here. But I did sink another 70 hours into this game over the past few months and enjoyed almost all of it. Nostalgia isn't that powerful. Nostalgia is strong enough to get us to buy the game again and play for a few hours, but still the game must stand on its own merits and not the benefit of flawed human memory. I don't know if I'll ever fully understand my continued fascination with this game. Believe me, I've tried. For years, I've tried to break this game down and figure it all out, and this series has been as meticulous of an attempt as I've ever attempted before. But it still seems like there is some aspect I'm
This is true.
overlooking. It's a combination of all these things I've mentioned, but something else too. Something emotional. Something that makes this weird, quirky game feel so familiar and so comforting. Maybe that ends up being a part of myself and not really the game at all. Maybe that's just me looking for something in my life, and it
I'll
just
just
happened to get
die.
attributed to this game years ago when I was young and naive. And maybe this game just reminds me who I once was and reminds me what I still enjoy today, as it certainly did play an instrumental part in laying the groundwork for many of my tastes in games today. It wound up spawning a dragon that I've been chasing for over decades, and I haven't been able to find. It's unlikely I'll ever get to find it too, because so much of what made this game great appears to have just been a total accident. The developers clearly didn't have a coherent vision in Oblivion's design. It just happened to turn out the way it did thanks to the individual contributions of the people working on it and circumstantial chance. How is something like that replicated? It's not. So what's the takeaway from all this? I guess just accept that some games are the way they are. You either love them or you don't. You either get them or you don't. The developers either reached you or they didn't.
This is not a very
It's hard
profound
to know
take.
when to appreciate something for what it is and when to criticize it for what it could have been. We want to criticize and critique to know how to improve, but sometimes it's important to just sit back and appreciate what we've already got. Just take some time, go back to an old game and try to relive and try to remember. If you enjoyed this series, please consider subscribing and sharing it with others who might get a kick out of it. I can't begin to calculate how many hours I really spent on this thing.
Make sure to subscribe
It's just
to
been months of
private
unraveling.
sessions on
Some
YouTube.
of it fun,
Holy
some of
shit,
it
how did I do that?
frustrating, and all of it rewarding. I got plans for the future, but another super long series isn't going to be exhausting. This project has taught me anything, brevity is a virtue, not a sin. So, I hope you'll stick around and join me for whatever comes next. Thank you, and have a good one.
He does make good videos, although you'll probably see most of them on my channel. Well, yeah, it just wasn't very, you know, I'm not like, oh, it's so true. I'm like, yeah, so true. You know, it's different. Let's see. Yeah, let's do these. I listened to like half of these, but I fell asleep during doing that. Yeah, I can see them. Excellent. This video is restricted. What about this one? Maybe this one works. I'm gonna kill myself. Yeah, the way that I'm playing these kind of makes it hard if the video is restricted. What's that guy's name? You know, a lot of these are probably going to be age restricted. Oh, this one is not.
Fallout
You were loud.
New Vegas is one of those games where you either love
There
it
we
or
go.
you hate it. I don't think there's really an in-between.
I can, but I
If you
don't know how
do
they
love
work,
It's
so.
not a game you can simply play once and put down forever. I personally have played through New Vegas around 27 times on various different consoles, and I still like to come back to it every so often. Those runs can range from heavily modded experiences with new quests, companions, weapons, and mechanics, or more vanilla runs that are only modded for the sake of stability and maybe an EMB shader to breathe a little bit of life into the dated Gamebryo engine. See, New Vegas is a game that has aged incredibly well in some categories and not so much in others, particularly in how the game runs on modern hardware. If you're like me,
I've played
you may have
specifically
played
this
these
game.
games on consoles during their initial
Might stream it
release,
at some point.
a scenario that could lead to its own
That'd
slew
be
of
fun.
problems like memory leaks leading to longer loading times and eventual crashes. I'm looking at you, Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion on the Xbox 360. Maybe you started on the PC with these games or moved from consoles onto PC for a better, more modular experience. The nice thing about Bethesda games is how easy they are to mod and how interested
Well, you're gonna get the
are in
entire
modding,
New Vegas
leading
experience
to a
from listening
slew
to
of
this
original
video.
content and even fixes that the developers may have never thought
Not
of.
really.
But with PCs comes new upgrades every few years. The PC you had back
It does
in
go through,
2010
like,
most likely has been
the
completely
whole
overhauled in
plot, though.
2021. And with new hardware, drivers, and OSs, etc., certain games become more and more difficult to offer
Basically
an
just
enjoyable
does a
experience
playthrough,
out
but
of the box.
explains it to you
Bethesda
instead of
games
actually
are one
doing it.
such
It's kind of
example
funny.
this. New Vegas
I've
is
listened to this
fairly
video
unstable
before.
on modern hardware and prone to crashes incredibly often. It's thanks to modders that the game is even in a playable state at this point, with guides like Viva New Vegas offering a means of creating an experience that is both vanilla and almost guaranteed to be stable. Even then, you're still not guaranteed to see zero crashes or graphical issues because the Gamebryo engine feels like it's been created using Gorilla Glue, masking tape, and chewing gum. The engine felt like it was on its last legs with the release of New Vegas in 2010, so it's surprising to see it managed to live all the way up to 2015 with the release
I can't
of
imagine why you
Story
would care
2
about that.
games. The story of New Vegas and its development begins in 2004 when Bethesda bought the rights to publish Fallout 3 specifically, as well as 2 sequels. Keep in mind that this was not a purchase of the entire intellectual property of Fallout as a series, although they would purchase this some 3 years later. Bethesda at the time was potentially best known for the Elder Scrolls series, specifically Oblivion, which was released in 2006. The studio had made a name for themselves in terms of open world RPGs to the point that they were so influential we began seeing copycat games being developed like
Uh-huh.
Two Worlds in 2007. Although that's up for debate. If you've never played Two Worlds or its sequel, good, don't. If you did, I'm sorry. The games are similar in mechanical concept, but Two Worlds has some of the most uninspired and unimaginative gameplay to the point that playing it is a chore. I got into the Elder Scrolls series with Oblivion and not Morrowind. I know this is seen as a fatal flaw to some of you watching this, but fear not, I have gone back and played the majority of Morrowind, if only to say I did. While Oblivion was my first foray into the series, there are reasons it remains my favorite. While Morrowind is superior to Oblivion through its many mechanics and open-endedness, Oblivion came with a certain charm and sense of immersion that was able to better hold me throughout the experience. And while the logic and writing within the various quests were not always the best, they were so unique and involved that I found it a requirement to complete every single one. Oblivion didn't just impress me as a kid, it changed my perspective on what video games could be. I was but a baby boy.
I'll be right
unaware
back.
of what was possible within games.
I'll just let
and
this play, I've heard
Oblivion
this.
showed me that there was so much more than I ever could have expected. So needless to say, when Fallout 3 was announced, I was at this point very impressed with what Bethesda had to offer. Oblivion had quickly become one of my favorite games at the time, and to hear we would be getting what was essentially Oblivion with guns
Here, I'll
gave
actually-
my
I got you.
immature mind a shot of so much serotonin that I had to have it. I was obsessed with playing this game, even though I knew nothing about the Fallout series.
This is just
before.
copyright infringement,
And
but
that's
it's
another
fine.
point we should briefly talk about. Fallout 3 is not the same game as Fallout 1 or 2, which are essentially top-down turn-based RPGs, a genre I would get heavily into much later into my life. And there was a lot of blowback from traditional Fallout fans about the direction the series was going. But this video isn't about that. I didn't, at the time, play Fallout 1 or or 2. I've since played 1 at the very least, but the previous entries have never swayed my opinion on 3 onward. When Fallout 3 did release, I was once again in love with what I considered a revolutionary experience at the time. Fallout truly felt, to me, like I was playing Oblivion in a modern setting. Well, as modern as the 1940s to 60s could imagine the future to be. And looking back, a lot of the writing and choices you could make within the game were fairly shallow in design. Sure, there's commentary on your choices. Are you doing good or evil? Or are you somewhere in between? But Fallout 3 had a tough time actually delving into these concepts of what makes something actually be good or not. When you blow up Megaton, there's no real punishment for doing so. No overarching commentary about your actions. If anything, it's played for spectacle. Most players probably blew up Megaton just to see it happen because it was a huge selling point in terms of choices within the game. The only real punishment you run into is hostile NPCs near the blast site, as well as your father giving you a bit of a scolding later on. It's very mild for the essential genocide you just committed. The impact of certain events are not portrayed as important as they should be. This is something New Vegas improves on in a way I'll discuss later, but only slightly. I enjoyed my time with Fallout 3. I even enjoyed my time with its various DLCs despite how shallow they actually were. Operation Anchorage, The Pit, Point Lookout, and Mothership Zeta were all interesting additions to the open world of Fallout 3, even if they were their own instanced areas, and Broken Steel was possibly the first time I've ever seen an ending to a game be remade in order to continue the storyline. Needless to say, I was very happy with Fallout 3 upon release, and played it consistently alongside Oblivion over and over again as DLC released. Once I was informed of New Vegas's development, however, I wasn't jumping for joy by any means. Around the time of Fallout 3 and New Vegas, we were just coming out of an era where games would generally get multiple different versions with the same title across various consoles. You'd see this most in licensed products like Spider-Man or Harry Potter. You could tell that the console or PC release was the main selling point, and all of the other titles were cheap reimaginings at best. And it's understandable why. It's not like the Game Boy Advance could do what the PS2 could. I was of the mind that this was still in practice, that a game would be released and then we may see a spin-off or port, if you can call it that is nothing like the game that preceded it. With New Vegas releasing so close to Fallout 3's end of development, although this was 2 years later, I figured my perception of spin-offs was going to account for this new release. So imagine my surprise when New Vegas releases and I see that it is almost exactly like Fallout 3. Obviously there's a new setting, but the engine and mechanics are almost all one for one at a surface level glance. Add in the ability to use iron sights, better use of skill points within dialogue, and many other minimal features that help lift the RPG experience, and you get a product that looks overall like an improvement on its predecessor. Almost like a true sequel, at least that's how I thought of it at the time. But the development of New Vegas is rife with turmoil, a game not created by Bethesda themselves but outsourced to Obsidian Entertainment, a developer known for their writing staff as well as members who had worked on Fallout 1 and 2, as well as the original concept for 3 titled Van Buren. Everything sounds great on paper, but pressure from Bethesda as well as the gaming market in general would ultimately lead to an unfinished product that still managed to shine brighter than anything Bethesda themselves could have created to this day. Fallout New Vegas is a once-in-a-lifetime experience, but one that you get to have over and over again. There's potentially never going to be another game like it, even with rumored sequels up in the air. It's a game that tries to do a lot with a little and manages to succeed for, the most part, while being rough around the edges. Today I'd like to analyze what made the game so good in my eyes, the commentaries it presents, how it presents them, and the overall gameplay experience as a whole. New Vegas is a game of factions. It's a game about war and capitalism, revenge and justice, about the strong using the weak for personal gain, and the DLC is so phenomenally strong at expanding upon this that it allows the entire package of New Vegas to feel like one cohesive set of stories. You could consider New Vegas a television show with multiple seasons, followed by sequel films in the form of DLC. New Vegas is open-ended, but it's here to tell a story, one that you get to shape much more than you could in Fallout 3. As I'm writing this, I'm seeing how long this script could potentially be. I imagine this will be one of my longer videos as there's just so much to discuss and go over. So So if you love New Vegas or want to learn a lot about it, please feel free to sit back and listen. This is a game that can appear small on the surface, but manages to pack so much within you're prone to finding something new within every playthrough. For that reason, I want to be clear, this retrospective will go over a lot, but not absolutely everything. We'll focus on major aspects of the game, such as the various factions within and how the player can interact with them. We'll look into how the player shapes the story and what these choices can lead to in terms of endings. We'll look at each DLC separately as its own section, as I believe they are unique enough to warrant it. And finally, we'll go over the themes, gameplay, and mechanics throughout. Not necessarily in that order, but you get the idea. If you enjoy videos like this, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing, as it helps me continue to make this content. With that out of the way, I'm Super Rad, and this is the big Fallout New Vegas retrospective.
Will you get it over with?
Maybe cons kill people without looking them in the face. But I ain't a fink. Dig? You've made your last delivery, kid. Sorry you got twisted up in this scene. From where you're kneeling must seem like an 18-karat run of bad luck. Truth is, the game was rigged from the start.
So let's get one thing out of the way here. Fallout New Vegas hasn't aged particularly well when it comes to running on modern hardware. For this reason, I'll be using various stability mods in order to make the game perform properly and crash as minimally as possible. To make this happen, I have used the Viva New Vegas mod list and guide to set this up, while skipping all of their gameplay-specific modifications. The goal of this retrospective is to talk about New Vegas as it was on release, and the best way to do this is to keep it as vanilla as possible. In fact, within this list, the only thing I have installed that may lead to visible gameplay changes at all are iStewie AI's tweaks and engine fixes, and things like visual modifications. Even within the tweaks, I have almost all of them disabled. Slightly better lighting and meshes here and there.
I am back if you are still awake.
Weapons sway while moving. These,
and if you're asleep, I'm still back.
Breath of life to the game without taking away from the core vanilla experience. The Pip-Boy is going to open a little faster for the sake of it. Explosions aren't going to shake my entire camera, but instead just shake the HUD. And things like the HUD have been cleaned up and upscaled to look better on higher resolutions. Weather stays the same, and various additions like being
also,
able to
I have more
sprint
alcohol.
or changing the recoil have been left not included. If any of these additions are a problem for you, I apologize. You can think
Oh yeah,
of
let me
this
refill my water
retrospective
bottle.
as a
Speaking
look
of
into
alcohol.
New Vegas Vanilla Plus if you want, though I do believe the changes to be fairly minimal. This means things like bug fixes are going to be the most prevalent. While it is important to acknowledge that Bethesda games are generally rife with bugs, we've already done so. Bethesda games are hardly future-proofed, and the sandbox environment alongside the Gamebryo engine, for example, can lead to a slew of issues. Oblivion is a key example in this, one that was fixed as best as it could be by modders, and you can find a list of said bugs online. The same can be said for New Vegas. For recording purposes, it'd just be too much trouble to go through all of the game and its DLCs with the countless problems that could arise. So we'll acknowledge that they exist, but we'll also do our best to avoid them for the sake of the video. The opening scene of New
Pace
Vegas
yourself, I'll
sets
be
the
fine.
stage for
I know
the
how much I can drink.
conflict at hand within the Mojave.
If I drink too much, I
The
throw up
bombs
everywhere,
fell,
so
the
I'm pretty good at
individuals who
I'm
survived
pretty good at
through
it.
living in the various vaults surrounding the wasteland emerged to build new societies, villages, and through this, various tribes. Tribes especially are a large driving force in terms of New Vegas's narrative. It's interesting that New Vegas uses the term tribes here. Whether it properly fits or not, I'm not completely sure. A tribe is a group of individuals who have over the years adopted a shared culture and ancestry, maybe their own language. This can take generations to develop, and considering the bombs dropped in 2077 and New Vegas begins in 2281, it's not absurd to think this type of social development did happen, especially when many of these communities were first trapped within the vaults. Alongside these tribes came the New California Republic, a union of the American Southwest that is meant to portray American values,
But,
including
thank you.
militarism, justice, law, and community. Regardless of how these old school American values may have been flawed, how they believe they are the greater good because a greater evil exists, and if you are not with them, you are against them. The NCR is notorious for collecting communities and absorbing them into the NCR whether they like it or not.
In every playthrough I do of New Vegas, I end up just slaughtering the NCR because I can't help it.
Provides safety and security from tribals and raiders that threaten those within the NCR, but outside of that, it's not so simple. In fact, the NCR has a lot more going on behind the scenes that paints a more nuanced picture of their diplomacy and politics and shows the cracks within. Regardless of what the NCR potentially does wrong, they are the driving force that keeps the Legion at bay. The NCR are potentially meant to be viewed as the good.
Was that a drop, or did I just
As
see a
mentioned,
blue and
it's
get too
much more
excited?
nuanced than that. We'll get more into
It was
the
the second
NCR
thing.
later,
Oh,
as
let's
well
go.
as the various
Is it even a good
tribes,
shield?
but
No.
The Legion, or Caesar's Legion, are an army situated on the other side of the Colorado River, the two sides being connected by the Hoover Dam.
I love
a
cheap
key
vodka.
point of power that dictates who is within control of the Mojave. The Legion is a conglomerate of 86 tribes that were created through conquest that led to a community of slaves to be used as weapons and fodder for the will of Caesar and his generals. The Legion wants the dam as the dam is one means of generating a large amount of electricity, and with electricity comes power. With power comes the Mojave. They are the counterpoint to the NCR, the bad karma to the good karma, and it's much
Yeah, and
less
also,
nuanced here, despite how
colors
Caesar
can overlap with, like, the
weaves
money,
through some of its dialogue. The
which
Legion
can make
is
new
evil.
colors,
Slavery
'cause it's
is
translucent.
evil, and they
Like
wish
a
to
blue and a
control
green
territory that
overlapping. Here, you know what? Let me show
belongs
you.
to them in order to spread evil. It's been 4 years since the NCR had to hold the dam
Still
against
alive?
the Legion,
I took a
which
break.
They were successful at doing, but unsuccessful at fully wiping them out. This led to the Legion managing to recoup their losses over time and strengthening their military to the point that they have a strong presence within the Mojave itself, even if they don't fully control it.
Alright, so
With
look,
various
a blue and a
patrols
purple
and camps
overlap,
situated around the desert in which the
and a
Legion
pearl.
used to capture slaves,
Well, okay, that's
punish
those are fucking
individuals,
also
and much
overlapping.
more. The third major faction within New Vegas is Mr. House, a genius individual who predicted the bombs dropping in 2077.
It's not really. It doesn't do it that much in this. It does it more at a distance.
To remain relatively unscathed within the main strip
Maybe it
of
needs
the
to be
city.
green in front.
House has used his influence in mind to create a new Vegas, in which has allowed him to rehabilitate various tribes.
It definitely
of the
can look
Mojave
like
that
exactly
now
like a
all
pearl, I'm
situate
not-
themselves within the strip. Not only tribes are on his side, however, House also holds the control over the enigmatic Securitrons, his automated robotic police force that hold a bigger part
Kinda.
to play within the grand narrative of New
Vodka
Vegas
is
as a
nasty.
whole.
Yeah, no, vodka
It's
is
the
gross as fuck.
embodiment of capitalism,
I mix it in with a bunch of
power,
lemonade, so I
and
can't
power.
taste it at
As
all.
strong as the NCR
It just
and
tastes
the
like
Legion can be,
alcoholic
they still
vodka.
have to
It just tastes like
live
alcoholic
by the
lemonade.
code.
That's what I
Here's
like
what
vodka for.
capitalism
The reason I
and
like it is that it's
capitalism
cheap as hell.
ultimately lead to. An authoritarian who keeps out those he does not deem fit to enter his world, and those that do must bow down before him, even if they've
I don't,
never seen
like-
him in person before.
If I did like a
Those who
shot of
consider
vodka,
this
I'd probably
approach
throw
very
up.
Similar to the Legion, he is an evil that exists within the world of New Vegas. He is the embodiment of capitalism and authoritarianism, creating his own slaves within. People within the strip may live a life of luxury, but they are hardly free, and you'll see that as we
I like it with
progress
apple
through the
juice, too.
quest line and various
But
side
lemonade's the
quests.
best.
It's really a pick your poison type of choice in terms of who you wish to side with within New Vegas. The Legion are explicitly evil. They are the villains that are there to allow forces to unite and take them down in the name of all that is good and just. But is House evil as well? Is he some necessary greater good?
Hey, cool,
Or is
drop.
he simply instilling his will through a
Scout, you
force
gave
that
me good
isn't
luck.
as visible as how the Legion does it? The
No, you
NCR
didn't.
takes
This
whatever
fucking
they
drop
want,
sucks
putting everything on
ass.
because they believe they
Hey,
have the
drop's a
moral
drop,
high
though.
ground to do so.
Let me update my
Everyone is
title.
corrupted here, some more than others, and you see why this is and hear their excuses as you play throughout the game, ultimately leading to one conclusion that I believe is the best course of action in terms of how you finish it. So who are you within this setting? In Oblivion and Morrowind, you were a prisoner. In Fallout 3, you grew
Think
up
it's
within a
18?
vault. They
Wait,
give you
let me make
very
sure.
restrictive narratives that can hinder your overall role-playing experience. New Vegas does this as well, but
I
much
mean,
less so. In
yeah,
terms of
mixing
being a
alcohol
prisoner,
with
you have to
soda
consider how
is
you got there. Was it just
pretty
or
classic.
unjust? Would you even want your character starting in a prison? Could it even possibly make sense for this situation within your personal narrative? Questions like that show how the overall
Yeah, I'm just
immersion can
double
take
checking.
slightly within the opening scenes of a Bethesda product. They want to hold your hand within some means, either through the beginning steps of the narrative or through the whole thing. In Morrowind, you're basically free to do as you please the moment you're off the boat. In Oblivion and Fallout 3, you are more on a railway track following a much more present narrative, making it harder to justify straying away from it. Obsidian Entertainment looks to fix that in some capacity. The main thing you know about your character, the only label placed on you is that you are a courier. You are within
Scout,
that
how old are
line
you?
and you have taken up a job. When you exactly started said job doesn't matter. Who you were before that job is completely up to you. Why you took that job is up to you, and after the opening scene, the fact that it was your job doesn't matter at
19,
all
I
until
see.
a very specific DLC later on. The main narrative of New Vegas opens up with your first introduction to Benny, who is part of one of New Vegas's strip tribes known as the Chairman. You're also introduced to the Grey Khans, a raider tribe who work
Yeah, I
with
would have
drug
guessed around
trafficking,
18.
leading to their own assortment of problems. You as a character are tied up within the cemetery just outside the town of Goodsprings. Benny has one of the Grey Khans digging your grave while producing a gambling chip from his suit's inner pocket. We'll discuss why you are in this situation later on down the line and the motivations of Benny for capturing you. However, in the present situation, Benny pulls a gun on your character and ultimately shoots you in the head, starting the adventure that is New Vegas. The first major step in terms of gameplay is the character creation process. This is probably the best time to point out that the characters within New Vegas, or
That was
really
almost a good
within
roll,
any
but it was
open
3
world
mag,
Bethesda
which
product,
increases
are known to
elemental
have some
damage,
pretty
and that
atrocious faces
gun
and
did not have an
textures.
element.
Oblivion characters look like an assortment of potatoes, yams, and squashes of various shapes and sizes. Meanwhile, Fallout 3 and New Vegas characters are in a perpetual state of looking like they are melting. There's mods to fix this, and I wouldn't say it's inexcusable that they look so bad. They look good enough in a sense, for the time, regardless
Honestly,
of how well or not
I don't really get
they
this
are.
guy's complaint.
Since this
Fallout
is
New
a
Vegas
more
characters
retrospective,
don't
it's
look that
worth
bad.
pointing out just how terrible
They look
almost
kinda
every
goofy, but they don't look
character in
bad.
this game can and probably will look. Luckily, there's a bit more of an opportunity for you as the character creator to make your character look a little more conventional than the rest of New Vegas's population. Before we even reach the character creation process, we are spammed with various add-on DLC. Many of these DLCs are bonus items that were provided to players who pre-ordered the game from specific stores. These included the Caravan Pack, the Tribal Pack, the Classic Pack, and the Mercenary Pack, and all of these were bundled together later for an optional purchasable add-on known as the Courier Stash, which was released alongside another
Is
item
this a New
pack known
Vegas
as the
analysis? Yeah.
Gunrunner's Arsenal.
Why did you
These
change your
item packs
YouTube
will
profile
spawn
picture,
notification
like,
menus for each
mid
one
watching a
immediately as you
stream?
load into the character creation process. It's a bit grating, but is also a staple of Bethesda design, one that Obsidian didn't seem to be fixing. Gunrunner's Arsenal gets a notification a bit later on, but just to point out, it's a more in-depth mod than the individual item packs themselves, adding in new unique weapons to find and purchase within the game, as well
I don't know,
as an
I've
assortment of new
I've never seen anyone do
modifications
that.
for weapons. New Vegas improves the Fallout 3 experience in numerous ways. One of the ways is the inclusion of weapon modifications. Specific modifications can be added to specific guns to offer various stat boosts and visual changes to the weapon itself. And Gunrunner's Arsenal adds to this with an assortment of new modifications for players to try out. Modifications aren't a game changer by any means, but the added customizability and freedom is a welcome
It's crazy that
addition. The player is
everyone
introduced to
in the
Dr.
chat
Mitchell, the
and
Doctor
currently
of
talk
Goodsprings,
and,
a
you know,
village
streamer,
within the Mojave. He saved you from a
in this
Bolivarian
Geometry
head
Dash
after
YouTuber
Victor,
stream
the
are
security
over
guard that
18.
was within Goodsprings, ultimately dug you out of a grave in the Goodsprings Cemetery. The narrative here gives good enough reason for why.
Granted,
you
there's only
accept
2
the
people
stats of
here,
your
but
character and
still.
customizing your appearance. Surgery was
It's also,
performed
I'm
by
not streaming
pretty
Geometry
heavy
Dash.
surgery
However,
at that, and this could lead to a few visual changes or mental differences from
it's the only
who
way
you
it
were
can
before the
possibly
bullet
happen.
and who you are now. Mitchell asked you to essentially look in a mirror to see if he made any mistakes, and it's within this mirror that we can create our character. Afterwards, we move on.
I gotta
to
be
bigger
playing a game that
tester,
no
which
one gives
is
a shit
the
about.
excuse used to determine our special stats. Special is a Fallout staple. It stands for strength, perception, endurance, charisma, intelligence, agility, and luck. From a role-playing standpoint, many of these stats can help you dictate just how smart or strong or overall talented you are. In terms of overall gameplay, these stats are an incredibly important factor in terms of your build and how you will experience the journey throughout the game. Take intelligence, for example. If you care about about skill points at all or care about maximizing at all, a high instat is almost a guaranteed necessity as the level of your intelligence.
Yeah,
skill points you receive
What's this
9
order?
intelligence, you'll receive 14 skill points in your first level up, with the additional 0.5 carrying over into the next one.
I feel like I'm older than you, though.
Usefulness is charisma, which is universally known to be a dump stat. Players can progress through the game with 1 charisma and never really worry about filling it up at all. The only thing charisma affects outside of bonuses to some skills initially, like speech or barter, is the effectiveness of companions. Companions are special NPCs in the game you can have tag along your journey after recruiting them. They have
Well,
their own
I
storyline,
am
questline,
20.
and perks that can be unlocked by engaging with
And
them.
I turned 21 in
their
July.
effectiveness or companion nerve is dictated by the charisma stat, starting at a 5% boost to damage and armor, leading to a 50% boost at level 10. However, companions are ultimately still useful and effective at 1 charisma. In terms of maximizing the player's effectiveness, charisma is essentially useless outside of the role-playing aspect. It should be noted that luck will specifically affect how good you are at gambling within New Vegas's various
What's that?
casinos. A high luck stat can make the process of getting kicked out of a casino much easier, but at the cost of various other stats. Once you're done with the vigor test,
1 in
feature
31
will
chance
comment
for this
on
to
your
be
overall
crazy.
stats, specifically if you are an all-rounder or if you have one stat that is particularly high or low. The next step is to sit down with Michael as he throws some psychological questions at you in order to determine your tag skills. The question process is inherently arbitrary. It's made to be arbitrary. Its only inclusion is for the role-playing aspect.
It's over.
Regardless of what you choose, in order to better define your character's personality, you can still choose whichever 3 tag skills you want. Tag skills are
You don't
3
get mine,
skills you can
but it's not the
select
6th.
total skills to give a 15-point boost to at the start of the game. This can be used in subsequent playthroughs to make sure you meet certain skill checks early in order to optimize quest progression and experience gained, if that's your thing. I want to take a moment to point out one specific set of questions Mitchell presents to you. At one point, Mitchell begins a Rorschach test in which you are shown an assortment of symmetrical ink drawings and are asked to explain what you perceive the picture to be. What do you perceive this picture to be? If you've never
The
played
arm of
this
my
game
right
or never
bicep
played
is
the
twitching for
DLC,
some
take a
reason.
moment to
This
pause
is so
the video
epic.
and let me know
Can
what
we
you
get 10
think it
likes on
is.
this
Now
stream,
take a look
guys?
at the options that were provided to you for an answer. Was your perception expressed within one of these options? If not, wait until the Honest Hearts DLC section where this will be brought up again and you'll hopefully feel a
Here,
little
I'll
more
like it to
validated.
help you.
Following this, players get to choose up to 2 special traits. You don't have to choose any at all, and the reason
There
for
we
that
go.
is that most traits provide both a bonus and a detriment to the player. For example, you can get an additional point of agility to your special stats, but will also be crippled more easily in battle. That's really not that bad within the gameplay of New Vegas.
For all
so it's a
YouTube
more
moderators
positive
currently
trait to
watching
pick
this stream,
overall.
I do not
That being
condone
said,
the
I
like
generally
bottage of
choose
this
2
channel.
specific traits for every playthrough,
Troll
those
face.
being the skilled trait as well as Wild Wasteland. Skilled provides 5 extra points to every skill you have, at the cost of taking a 10% EXP hit for the remainder of your playthrough. This can be immediately remedied within your first level by taking the first level of Swift Learner perk, which provides a 10% bonus per the amount of times you selected, that being a maximum of 3. So the real cost of the trait is either 10% of your EXP through the whole playthrough or 1 perk. And in terms of what's
I'll be the
really
fastest
useful,
person to
getting a
lose
total of 66
monetization
points,
of all
which you
time.
can consider a perk in itself when comparing it to the around 14 to 15 you'll receive normally. Once all of the questions have been answered and all of your stats set up, the player is given some clothing
Got
and
it like
Pip-Boy
yesterday.
before
Was
being
it
sent
today?
on their way. The Pip-Boy is another staple item within Fallout as a series. In New Vegas and Fallout 3, it acts as your main menu to see stats, interact with your inventory, check your map and quests, and notes like a journal. This is how the player is able to properly navigate the world, fast travel.
Not actual
interact
monetization,
with
though,
what
'cause I don't
they're
get ads on my
supposed to do.
videos.
As a mechanic, the Pip-Boy fits right in with the
I can
world of
set up
Fallout. It
memberships.
adds a
Should I
sense
set
of
up
immersion
memberships,
to the
guys?
traditional menu
Think anyone will
concept and
join?
allows players to properly roleplay their
I made it so
character as
super
if they
chats
were
work. I
looking
feel
for
like
their
that's
own
probably
set
enough.
of logs and
I don't know if anyone's
statistics.
joining
It's like
Troy
a
Smith
big,
Gaming channel.
clunky Fitbit. There's still a necessity in terms of suspension of disbelief, of course. The player wouldn't realistically be carrying 20 guns and 4 different outfits while trekking it through a desert. But the added level of immersion, no matter how small, is always a benefit to a series. Before leaving,
I don't
the
even
players
know-
offered the
what can you
ability to
even
turn
do?
on New Vegas's unique feature of hardcore
You
mode.
stop eating food.
The
I don't know if you
feature
should
of
stop
hardcore
eating
mode
food.
includes stimpaks
Food's
each
kind of
time,
important.
having weight assigned to ammunition, and requires the player to eat, drink, and sleep regularly, otherwise they will suffer various status debuffs that can eventually lead to death if unchecked. The idea of hardcore mode is to add a sense of realism and simulation.
I can make a super cheap one. It's like $1, I think.
Fits particularly well within the game's design and engine. New Vegas at least tried to make it work.
I don't know what I think I can add like emotes. I could give you like some Roblox man face emotes.
It's so tied to hardcore mode, however, that playing on normal effectively makes this skill useless. There's virtually never a time when cooking food is even mildly a necessity. And what is the reward for keeping this mode in?
What would the exclusive videos be?
Achievement. Even the developer
So, like,
isn't recommended. So for that,
I don't know, I think those are stupid. I feel like if I'm gonna release a video, I feel like everyone should see
On a
it.
related topic, work and reloading benches also exist for similar purposes. Players can convert ammo from one type to
Yes,
another,
it's like something
or craft
unlisted.
various usable items like weapon repair kits. Within all of my years of playing New Vegas, I don't believe I ever found this to be immediately necessary within any capacity. What New Vegas threw in as a bit of flavor to help players feel more involved.
Well,
with
what I
the
could do
just
is,
that,
if anyone
it's
fucking
overall
watched
something
me,
you can
which
completely
is not
ignore
happening.
within your playthrough and never realize it was even a mechanic
But if
to
I
begin
did
with.
actually have
You may
theories,
start
I
to
could make it.
question why
I
you
could
have
like
so
do
many
level
empty
requests, but for
ammunition
bits,
casings,
but
however.
or
This
not
would
bits,
later be
for
greatly
super chats or
expanded
whatever.
upon in Fallout
But
4
I'm not
to its own detriment, but that's a
convinced
topic
that
for another
reality
video,
is
potentially.
the one we're
Upon
living in.
exiting the house, the player is met with another set of DLC notifications. These include all 4 major story DLC as well as the notification for the Gunrunner's Arsenal, which I mentioned previously. Each of these major DLC raise the
whatever.
player's level
I used to
cap by
Twitch.
5, meaning they go from a cap of
I used
30 to
Twitch for a
50,
while. I mean, I
which
still have
is
a Twitch
still
account.
relatively small
I could have gotten
considering
affiliate, but I
most
never
players
did
who are going to
enough
be
level
gaming
request
if they
streams
plan to take
in a
part
row.
of the game's
It's
content.
really not hard to
Another
get
reason I
affiliate on
like
Twitch.
gaming
Just
skill
play
tree.
Geometry
There
Dash
is an abundance of EXP to be had, and hitting level 50 isn't
and
very
put level
easy.
request in your title.
That being said, you may find that you hit 50 early on before taking
But I never
part
did.
in a large portion of said content, and that can seem oddly limiting in a way, but I don't think it's a bad thing. Take a game like Dark Souls, for example. You can level up essentially infinitely, but there is a soft cap on how much each stat increase will be based on
Twitch
how
is
much
fun.
you've
It
already
has
raised it.
the
This
average
encourages you to raise
the average
your
user age on
stats to
Twitch
certain
is like
thresholds and better
a couple
specialize your
levels
character in
is like
certain
levels.
small
Holy
subset of
fuck.
skills. It's the same in
Um,
New Vegas, although much more simplistic.
A couple
You
years
level
above
50
YouTube,
times, meaning you have
so
to
it's
decide what you want your character
more
to specialize
tolerable.
in ahead of time, so that you aren't left with the inability to finish off your preferred build.
I haven't drank in a
If you're
while, so I have like
really
no
good at
tolerance.
Guns, lockpicking, and medicine, you'll probably want to focus on those early on, and then spread out excess skills once you've met certain goals. The limiting
Space
factor
UK.
of the leveling system makes it so that you have to specialize, and through specialization, you will find yourself strong in one scenario and less so in another. This allows for dynamic challenges based on the build you have decided upon. Dead Money, for example, is a very melee-centric DLC, but it doesn't have to be. That being said, if you haven't built for it, it's going to be quite the challenge for you. You're going to have to work your way around the map of the Sierra Madre Resort in a way that is going to be a
I
bit
actually
more
own
challenging
Zbot.
for you over a stealth-based melee build, for example.
I used to use it like a while ago. You wanna here's the funniest shit. I have my first hard demon was Future Fucked, right? I literally have my completion of it as a Zbot macro. Like I would just record while playing while using Zbot because it didn't have like a physics change, so there was no lag. I would just record and play shit. So I have my exact Future Fuck completion as a macro.
Within the final arc, you can fit in the 4 DLCs, which I suppose.
Yeah,
you
Zbot
can consider
is
because they were
like
released during the life
$5.
of the
I think it was like
Vegas
$4.
lends
Maybe it was
itself
like
very
2.
well
I don't
to
know.
the
It was 4 or 2.
The storytelling and writing are paced exceptionally well if the player takes the intended route to get to their destination, but they don't have to. And we'll talk about that a bit in a minute. The first NPC players will run into
Oh shit, I got dropped.
Securitron Victor, who has the image of a friendly cowboy on his CRT.
Oh shit, it
Victor is
sucks
the
balls.
individual who saved you, and there's
Dude,
not
level
too much to
68
get
and your
out of
damage
him
is
at
that
this point
low?
in the narrative. Victor
Please
lives
kill
in
yourself.
Goodsprings and ultimately manages to save you from an untimely demise. Various individuals within the town have their own opinions on Victor. Easy Pete, a retired prospector, holds no ill will towards him, while Trudy, a kind of town leader, is overly suspicious of him. At this point, the game is
It's cool.
completely open to the player. They don't need to interact with Goodsprings at all. If you want to
I like
go
farming.
explore the Mojave, you can. But if you want to
You
learn
know,
more
when I
about
get
the
this farm, I
story,
just have to
if you are
go find
interested
something
in
else to
information
farm.
or even even
It's all
revenge,
farming.
which
I don't
is
mind.
most likely you
I'm
can head
I'm having a
into
good time.
tavern to begin your inquiries. Before that, however, it's good to note that the cemetery is very close to your current location. Stopping by allows you to find the grave you were buried in, as well as one of the several collectible snow globes. These are somewhat similar to bobbleheads from previous entries, but instead of giving you stab boosts, can be sold off to Mr. House for small sums of caps, around 2,000. Add-on content can even have globes as well, which will automatically provide the sum of caps upon collecting them. Around your grave, it's also possible to find a pile of cigarette butts around, which can be used later in dialogue options to implicate the individuals who put you into the ground. So I want to set some ground rules for this retrospective, specifically the route and destinations we expect to run into. New Vegas is very open.
The entire reason I even did a GD level request stream was I got the fucking Bone Shooter hybrid and I was like, well, I have nothing else to do in this game, and I have this guy in my chat being like, hey, you should play GD, bro. You weren't like that, but you
with
know.
that in mind, our first stop is the local tavern in town, where we are immediately met with Sunny Smiles and her dog Cheyenne. Sunny effectively acts as an optional tutorial for the game, one that I think is rather well thought out overall. There are multiple steps to the tutorial that start with teaching the player how to shoot, how to use the game's new Iron Sights mode, something that wasn't in Fallout 3, and how to hunt, gather, and cook. Many of these steps can be stopped along the way if the player feels they are not necessary. In fact, the entire tutorial
And I have
doesn't need to
maximized
take
my
place
combat
outside
rifle
of the main
proficiency,
shooting range.
and
But if you do
we
take
got
part in
a
these
legendary.
steps, steps
What
will
is
provide
that?
various rewards like items or
TDR.
this is an
I
incredible
want to say that's called a
improvement to tutorial
protector.
segments of Fallout 3, which were on rails to
Well,
an
let's go.
extreme.
You should make.
Player
I'm
has
never.
learned to
No,
shoot
I'm
with
never
the
making a
various
short. You
mechanics
can
of
call
the
me
game
on this if I
to
ever
stay
do, but I'm not
involved
going
as they
to.
grew
I'm
up.
never
There was
making a
no
fucking
room
short.
for freedom
Ever.
within this section of the game, and said introduction was fairly long. After completing the tutorial, regardless of where you decided to end it, you're asked to return to the saloon and introduce yourself to Trudy.
I don't know
She's
why I picked that
essentially
up. I don't
the
want it.
town leader. Doing so has you run into Trudy while she's in an argument with a man named Joe Cobb. Joe Cobb is looking for someone, and he believes
I
that
can't
the
even
individual
see
is
shorts. I
someone
have an
in
extension
town.
that
Trudy isn't up
makes
for
them not
giving
show up.
any information on the subject. This is your first true exposure to the idea of factions. New Vegas is littered with small and large factions. The NCR are a fairly large faction, while Good
I will
Springs is
make
a
videos
fairly
that I
small
think
one.
people
Joe
will
Cobb
watch,
belongs to a faction known
but
as
I'm
the
not going to
Powder
make
Gangers,
videos
a group of
specifically
chain
for
gang
views.
prisoners who were brought to the Mojave
You know what I
to
mean?
build a railroad, only to turn against their captors when given dynamite for the job. Players can choose to help Good Springs in this situation or help the Powder Gangers, and there's a clear karmic line between the two. Good Springs represents the good karma side of the choice. You can help individuals who are being bullied and attacked by the bad karma side, aka the Powder Gangers, and will for the most part be following these alts we take the most.
Like, I've never made a video that I didn't want to.
Talking to Trudy informs you
I've
that
never made a
Ringo
video that I
Caravanner
was
is
like,
holed
this
up
is
in an abandoned
fucking
gas
stupid.
station just behind Doc Mitchell's house.
But
Visiting
it'll
said
get
gas
views.
station introduces
Never
you
done that.
to Ringo, who holds you at gunpoint.
I mean, a lot of my
Before
videos are
skill checks,
stupid, but that's
the
because I think they're
say
funny.
that they mean him no harm, and he will immediately
I have this one stupid video that got no views. It's just like, it's 20. Let me, hold on. It's really funny to me. Let me go find it.
If you didn't meet said skill check, but no, Ringo just trusts you. An outsider of the city that is not a Good Springs
Here it is.
resident and very well could be a Powder Ganger.
Check out this video
This is
that I
also
made.
your introduction to Caravan.
This is the
Being
funniest
the
video on my
first
fucking
game
channel, and
you
nobody knows it
played, and
exists.
One that I don't plan on going into too much detail with. The idea is that you construct a deck and create caravans with said deck in order to
Actually, the
make
funniest
your
video on my
own
channel is the one of me being
contracts.
poltergeist
That
while I
is a
watch Markiplier
very
play
light
FNAF 3, but
explanation. I never enjoyed
this
playing
one's really good
Caravan,
too.
especially not as much as I enjoyed playing Pazak in Knights of the Old Republic or Gwent in The Witcher 3. Offering to help Ringo sets you on a quest to get help from various key Good Springs citizens. Sunny Smiles will join you no questions asked, believing that the Powder Gangers to be a problem that needs to be solved sooner rather than later, as they will eventually attack the town regardless. Some of the other individuals you need to convince require a bit more work. Trudy is one of those individuals. There's two ways you can fix her to bolster the morale of individual unknown citizens, so there's more hands for the battle to come. This is potentially your first introduction to skill checks. In Fallout 3, almost every skill check was possible to pass regardless of your skill, as it was percentage based and you could metagame through
I hate the
skill
default
in order to
YouTube
get your
emojis. They're
desired
so funny,
effect
though.
every time. New Vegas answers this issue by making the skill requirements a hard number, meaning if you do not have 25 speech, for example, you're not going to be convincing Trudy of anything. But the game throws you a bone here. If you can't convince Trudy through charisma or speech, maybe you can convince her with a well thought out plan that requires a sneak check. If you're looking at the footage at hand, you'll see that I meet neither of these. Even with magazines, a temporary skill boosting item, I still am one off from meeting the speech check.
You know what? I like this
A
one.
little more nuanced. An item like a stealth boy can raise your sneak skill to 100 to make you near invisible to enemies. It's a means of
Here, I like
allowing you
these
to get
like
out of sticky
3.
situations
These 3
or
are
sneak
good.
in somewhere
These are
where
banger
your skill boy
emojis.
may not be up to the task. But if our sneak skill is 100, wouldn't that mean we can now pass the dialogue skill check with Trudy? Probably not, right? The stealth boy isn't providing you with any mental knowledge of stealth, it's just making you invisible, and the 100 plus to sneak is a mechanical side effect of that so the enemies won't notice you. But the game doesn't see it that way. Your skill through effects is your skill in dialogue, regardless of if it doesn't make sense, meaning we can stop by the Good Springs abandoned school, play through the hacking and lockpicking minigame, grab a stealth boy, use it, and then return to Trudy and convince her to help us. Obviously, skill bonuses need some sort of category or flag to dictate if they carry over into specific skill checks like dialogue choices. It really makes no sense to be able to use a stealth boy and suddenly have master level knowledge of stealth, essentially turning you into a post-apocalyptic Sam Fisher or Solid Snake.
So you were
That's not
playing
what should
Roblox
be
earlier.
happening
What were you
there, and it
doing?
feels more like an
Keep in
exploit
mind,
than
I have
smart
not.
play
I
that
have
was an
played
intended mechanic.
one
Skill
Roblox
points
game
permanently raising skills
ever.
by 1 makes sense,
And it
kind
was
of.
several
Needing
years
a
ago,
magazine to help
and
you
I
convince
was
somebody of
blackout
something
drunk.
or help you repair something
Not quite. I can
makes
still
sense,
remember what happened,
kind of.
but I
Regardless,
was
Trudy is
probably the
convinced
most
to help and
intoxicated
next
I've
up
ever
is
been in my
Pete,
life.
who can provide dynamite via an explosive
I was like
Moving on is Chet, who runs the local general
15.
goods store and requires a barter check in order to provide leather armor to the citizens that are going to take part in the fight. Finally, Doc Mitchell will offer up stim packs without a fight, but the player can get a bit more out of him with the medicine skill check. I believe New Vegas' skill check system is overall
That's fucking awesome.
one that was introduced
Guess how many hours I have in GD?
it allows the player to meet certain requirements and forces them to fail if others are not properly planned out. This means that the player is generally not going to be able to hit every check unless they come back later, and that sometimes isn't an option. Subsequent players
No, actually,
allow you to
guess.
plan ahead for this.
I want to see how close you
Maximize
get.
the amount of checks you'll pass as you reach them if you desire to. But this is generally not what will happen during an initial playthrough and can lead to the loss of bonuses and experience as successful skill checks provide them. You get bonuses for what you put your stats into, and you also miss out on certain aspects for those same choices. It's balanced in that sense. Before returning to Ringo, this is a good time to talk about the
I
karmic
have
system in New Vegas.
close
Outside
to
of the
double
lottery
that.
aspect, the karmic system
Okay,
is
to be
a
fair though, a lot of that's
outside of the
AFK.
notifications
So
you receive
your
from
guess
the
is pretty accurate to the amount of like active hours I have probably.
in this game, regardless of if you make multiple
Not counting mobile when I
Let's
was
use Trudy's Saloon
very
as
young.
an example. Near the entrance is a second entrance that is locked. Picking this
Not very
locked
young, but
exit
you know.
leads to bad karma. There's also a terminal
I
inside
played
that
from
also
like
leads to bad karma,
1.6
which you access
to
and hack
super
it,
early
which leads to a safe
2.1,
unlocking that will
and then I
also
took
lead
a
to
break
bad
until
karma
like
when accessing it. These are
late
essentially 4 or 5
2021.
negative karmic checks within this one room alone. If you're playing a good character who makes good
So
choices,
all of my
this will
GD
lead to
hours are
you
from late
to steal
2021.
or
Keep in mind
if you
also,
can
I've
access
played a lot of
anything
Lucky
that
Draw
isn't yours,
and
it will be overlooked and pushed
a
to
similar
karma
level
based
like
on
it.
the major choices
Yeah,
you
see,
make
I
in the
have
game,
like
making
negative
good
natural
morale
skill in
systems
GD.
difficult, and using the
So
one that Bethesda provided
every
with
bit
Fallout
of
3
skill
is
that I
more
have, I
surprising
had to
than
like
anything else. Killing
fight for
friends
my
and foes
life
can
to
provide plus
obtain.
100 karma per kill, and that's to a maximum of 1,000. It's comically easy to max out this stat and much harder to lower it unless killing civilians. And outside of one companion in the game, potentially
Like, that's
losing
3,000
your
hours of
karma, there is no real
mostly
effect on
like
your overall
playing the
gains
game.
outside of your role-playing experience. In Fallout 3, your karma dictates which companion you could recruit. In Fallout New Vegas, this is almost a completely useless mechanic. Obsidian looked to fix and improve on a lot of what Bethesda offered, so it was surprising to see this mechanic.
Yeah, see, I was so
effective
bad when I
and
first started
useless.
playing, and then I continued to be
Said
so
they
bad
improved on
for
it in their own way
a very
and
long
used the reputation
time.
system. Reputation is the player's social standing.
Dude,
within
my
any
first
given
practice
faction. By
run
completing
of
quests
of
for a faction
Can't
or
Let
just
Go
doing nice things
was
for
like
them, the player will
650
rise
attempts.
through the ranks of potential reputation levels by gaining
Like,
fame.
you know,
Separately,
auto
the player's
checkpoint,
infamy level, which raises
full
when they perform
mobile
insane
retard
tasks,
mode.
like killing civilians or getting caught
I was like-
pickpocketing or stealing. The player's standing is
I don't
then
know, I was in
based on the
elementary
values of
school, I
each of these
think.
stats combined. If you're within a high fame threshold and have no infamy, you can
Each,
be raised all the way to idolized status.
every main level,
Begins to grow
like
alongside
literally
you.
all of them,
You can move down to Dark Hero,
for the skill level I was at,
these are neutral reputations
took me
in a
like
sense,
several
but
days
so much
/
good, they
weeks.
sort of overlook the fact
Time
that
Machine
you
took
can
me
move
months
out
to
bonuses
beat.
this way. Additionally, getting too infamous with
Like,
little fame can lead
when
to
I
bad
say I
results.
had to like fight for my life for my
Bonuses
GD
and
skill, I
rewards
am not
for
kidding.
infamy are dependent on the faction at hand. Helping Good Springs can lead to discounts from Chet and Trudy, and you can even lock yourself out of Ringo's questline if you manage to build up enough of a negative reputation.
I took like, yeah, no, I'm not kidding.
Maybe that's why he's so
I took like
popular.
4K on Club Step probably. This was when I was really young, to be clear, on like my iPad.
Overall, the reputation system is a
Club
very
Step,
welcome
when I
mechanic
came back
that
to the
I believe
game,
should have replaced
took me
the
like
karma
4K, I
system
think.
entirely. Instead of karma, people judge you based on
Deadlocked
the
actually took me
reputation
less,
of
but I had
the
played
mechanic.
some
I can
user
even
demons
believe
at that
the only
point.
reason the karmic system is still in this is because Bethesda most likely demanded it. Returning to Ringo and informing him of whether or not you managed to convince the individuals I mentioned previously will trigger Sunny Smiles to show up and inform you that the Powder Gangers have arrived. Depending on who you convince, you will have various different experiences overall. With everyone convinced, your citizens will be armed with
I played
weapons,
every
guided
GD
by
level
hand.
actually
Karma,
chronologically
fairly trivial. Lets you
until,
convince
well,
that
obviously
there is
Club
a
Step,
and
although I
easy
did get like
way
40
for
on it
such
before I
process. Overall, the questline is a
ow,
fantastic
before I
example in
conceded.
terms of introducing the player to how
But then I
Obsidian
also
handles
skipped like
the
electrodynamics.
player choice. Every aspect of the quest
I beat
has its own
electrodynamics
level of
after
content
Club
already
Step, bro.
to it.
I'm not even
Various
kidding.
bonuses can be
I think
attached
I
to
also
the
did that
quest
with
to make better results
Hexagon
overall.
Forest,
You don't
but
even
that
end up
was
going
kind
through
of just
this
for the
quest,
bit.
as you can
I just
choose to
didn't really want to
side
beat
with
it.
Powder Gangers instead. This has
I beat Toe 2 after Deadlocked because I liked Deadlocked more. My first demon was
the character you built and how you plan
Club
to play
Step,
will
I
dictate
think.
what is available to you by the climax of this quest, and many other quests within the game are
It was
typically
either
all
Club
the
Step or
same.
Dear Nostalgist. I
Upon
can't
defeating
remember
the
which one
Powder
I beat
Gangers,
first.
As we have chosen to do, Ringo will praise the player for his help.
Also, I got another
offering
drop.
rewarding
Let's
quests, and
go.
ultimately offer a greater reward when we run into him again later on. In terms of interaction and quest lines, Good Springs
That's not a
essentially
bad one,
becomes
but
stable at
no
this point.
accuracy
Everybody
and
goes back to exactly
pretty
what they
shit
were
fire
doing
rate.
before, except Ringo is no longer there, and the Powder Gangers
Dear
are
Nostalgist was my
back.
first user
So
demon,
where
though.
do we go from here? Well, asking around about Benny and the people who helped in your attempted murder points you in the direction of the Strip, but it's not so easy to access it, and I'll explain why shortly. Benny knew this as well, and therefore took a different path. If the player is to follow them, they are directed towards a neighboring town not far off known as Prim. There's a choice presented to you by this point in the game. You can head south and follow Interstate
Platinum
15
Adventure.
to take a long route through various
Oh
cities
god,
that will lead
I
you
have beaten that.
for revenge and answers in terms of the
I like the
manufacturer.
gimmick of pretending it has 5
Alternatively,
coins for
there's
some
the
reason.
opposite direction of the I-15, an option that is the road less taken. Despite New Vegas being within sight of Sloan, the construction camp beside the local quarry, approaching Sloan has players stopped by Chomps Lewis, who informs you that the road ahead is infested by Deathclaws. If this is your first foray into the series, you may not know what Deathclaws are, and that's excusable. Deathclaws are ruthless creatures, ones that can attack.
I
you
mean,
while
at least
you're
it's not the
armored.
nightmare.
Sure, you can kill the odd young Deathclaw stragglers around the area, but one adult is most likely going to be too much for you at your current level, with the area ahead infested by them. Deathclaws are potentially the biggest wild threat within New Vegas and Fallout in general, but New Vegas has one or more species that we'll look into later, and said species can give Deathclaws a run for their money. So south it is, and while there aren't Deathclaws infesting the roads ahead, there's plenty of Powder Gangers
Think
for
I
us
was
to
Speed
deal with,
Racer.
and
Nice.
they're less than happy
I've
about
also
how
beaten
we
that.
treated their friends back in Good Springs. This is where
I didn't
faction
really.
armor becomes
Speed
a
Racer
more prevalent
was pretty
mechanic.
easy for me.
Generally speaking, I don't think I ever actually found myself using faction armor all that much within my general playthroughs of the game, but it does have key advantages here and there. The most obvious
I don't know if you were here when I said this, but I literally went... My hardest went from an easy demon to an insane demon in 2 completions. Because my hardest was this easy demon called like Blaudelus or whatever. It's like Bloodlust but in French by Mr. Spaghetti. It was a weekly demon, you might know it. And then I beat Future Funk, and then I beat Batutsi 2. And those were like back to back. Well, they were like months apart. but they were back-to-back in terms of completions.
New Vegas, without any radios, gives off an eerie feeling of isolation within the Mojave. The groans and moans of the instruments leave you feeling defensive, and every interaction you make with
I do that enough when it's like actual people. Especially bad when it's
people who they say
something
they
that I've
are they
maybe
looking
said
to
on
help you
stream.
or stab you in the back. A lot of people are out there for themselves and themselves only, leading to a lot of confrontations throughout your travels where individuals are far less than genuine in how they present themselves to you. None of that matters, however, as most players are going to be navigating.
Although I did have, I had
New
decent
Vegas
progress.
baby.
Well, not decent, but I had some progress on like some random extremes. Like I'd done some runs.
New Vegas has 2 major radio
And
stations,
shit like that.
Mojave Music Radio
And I'd done.
Mojave
I don't think I
Music
mentioned this.
Radio
I'd done
is
like a
non-stop
bunch of
station
challenges.
purely for
Actually,
fans
mostly
of
my
country
own
and
challenges.
western tracks.
That's where
Such
most
you'd
of,
expect
honestly,
players
still
to
that's where
tackle
most of my skill
bombs
comes
style
from.
Back between the 40s and 60s, although some of these songs were made as early as 2003. Radio New Vegas is a little more than that. Similar to Fallout 3's Galaxy News Radio, Radio New Vegas is hosted by a DJ, that being Mr. New Vegas.
There are a
who's
few
speaking
Insane Demons I could recommend you if you were interested, but if you're not, then I will not.
multiple open world games where the player's actions can be seen to have taken effect through news stories on the radio. Grand Theft Auto was probably the first to popularize this, and it's been a staple of open world games with radio stations for years to come. The effect of the radio in New Vegas, in my opinion, removes all of the intended atmosphere from traveling the Mojave Wasteland.
Defo M?
Not
Okay.
necessarily for the worst. Rather, it's a
What kind of
choice
levels
that
do you
the
like?
player gets to make. Do they want the feeling of isolation and danger throughout their travels, or do they want to trek along Highway 95 while listening to Johnny Guitar, Jingle Jangle Jingle, Blue Moon, and many others? It's up to the player, and while on subsequent playthroughs I like to experience the isolating nature of the desert from time to time, I always find myself returning to the radio and blasting Big Iron throughout. Approaching the correctional facility with powder ganger armor attached prevents you from being attacked, but it doesn't necessarily fool the guard at the front gate, who will still need to be paid 100 caps in order to enter.
Nothing with.
peacefully. Within the
Okay,
physical
define
sector
Weird
are
Deca.
multiple
Real
no-name
quick for
power
me.
gangers alongside Myers, whose sole purpose is related to a Prim quest line we'll come back to later. We're not here for Myers or any of the small-time powder gangers anyway. We're here to meet Eddie. Eddie runs things around the facility after the powder gangers took over, and he has some jobs for you to take care of as an alternative to him killing you right then and there. I Fought the Law is a short quest line where you help the powder gangers with a
Hard
few
to sight
various
read.
tasks
Okay.
before ultimately leading to an NCR assault on the facility. It starts simply enough with Eddie asking you to deal with
What if it's hard to sight read, but not because of the Deca?
former powder ganger, I guess you could say. Chavez has broken off from the main group within the NCRCF and is shaking down travelers on his own with a few other deserters. If your speech skill is high enough, you can convince him to leave the area. If not, like Super Rad Jr. here, you're forced into an altercation, leading to either your
Okay.
death or theirs. Regardless of how Chavez was dealt with, you can return to Eddie,
I'm gonna do
who
4
has
more
a
runs.
task for you.
That'll hit
This time
110.
there is a
That'll hit
merchant looking
310.
to sell
I'm
around
gonna
the
go to the
facility, and
bathroom,
he hasn't been run off yet,
and
which is
then
suspicious to Eddie.
I'm
He
gonna
has
switch to
some
GD really quick
it's around
and
this
show you the
point I ran
levels.
into Barton Thorne, who claims his girlfriend is being attacked by geckos up by a nearby ridge. Heading over to the location he mentions and dealing with the geckos brings you to a stash on top of a cliff, and our first encounter with
I'm not gonna change the stream title so no one clicks on it. Because I don't want to get a bunch of. Well, I probably won't get anyone honestly if there's not level requests in the title. But I don't want to get people coming in and expecting GD because I don't want to actually play GD. I'm just gonna go back to this.
Where Indy hid in a lead-lined fridge to avoid being killed by a nuke. It's pretty absurd, and this is a way for the developers to poke fun at that. Similarly, on the ridge we're met with the corpse of Johnny Five Aces, a character from an abandoned video game concept called Zyborn Clock, something that was mocked constantly on the Something Awful forums. With the area safe, Barton approaches you and explains that this was all a ruse so that he could kill you and take the stash. A fight ensues, and then we quickly move on towards the merchant we were here for in the first place. An intelligence check of 6 or a speech check of 30 allows you to dig into the merchant's business within the area. He admits to being a bounty hunter and can be convinced to be sent on his way. Though I ended up killing him anyway, I don't think there was a karmic reason not to. Again, not that karma really matters in this game. Returning to Eddie for a potentially final time has him inform you that he is worried about the NCR potentially coming to take back the facility and tasks you with heading to Prim to find
Okay, I lied. I have to go to the bathroom now.
report back. This is why hitting up the NCRCF early is a nice way to pace the player.
Alright, let me
It gives a second additional reason to head there outside of chasing
update
Benny, and in
the
a way helps
stream
the role-playing
title.
experience for people that want to head to Primm, but don't necessarily want to follow the main quest line.
It's
Approaching
19
Primm
drops, I
alongside
think.
the highway,
Yeah.
you're stopped by an NCR soldier, informing you that the town has been overrun by powder gangers who have broken off from the pack. When asked if they will be attacking the correctional facility, the soldier has no idea and informs you that Lieutenant Hayes.
Alright, I will be right back.
When asked why they aren't
I'll
protecting
do
town,
the copyright
they
infringement
aren't
thing and just
under
put the
NCR
video
jurisdiction, and even if they were, the
full
NCR
screen.
are too short on supplies to do anything about it. This is an interesting situation that we'll touch on in just a minute, as it helps better paint the priorities of the NCR and showcases how they aren't necessarily the good guys they portray themselves to be, despite performing good from time to time. In terms of finding out about the correctional facility, there's multiple ways of going about it. Lieutenant Hayes won't tell you anything unless you pickpocket a trooper for military orders, but there's another way of going about this that involves heading further into the actual town proper. Heading across the bridge to Primm, you can watch out for and disable mines along the way. After dealing with a few powder gangers turned escaped convicts, you can head into the Vicky and Vance casino, where the remaining townspeople are held up and armed to the teeth. Seriously, I'm pretty sure if the town felt like it, they could easily take the neighboring hotel back without any issue, something the NCR could do as well if they wanted to, though they claim they can't. Instead, it's in the hands of you, an individual, but not just yet. Instead, we can talk to Johnson Nash for a variety of important topics, those most obvious being information on Benny and the cons who attacked you. Johnson will inform you that the sheriff has been murdered, but his deputy who was captured in the hotel may have information that you're looking for, thus encouraging you to head inside and save both the deputy and the town. Nash works for the courier service, and handing over the order for the platinum chip you were carrying allows him to give you more details about how the delivery came to be. It turns out Victor, the cowboy Securitron from Good Springs, was the one to put in the request, along with 5 other orders. 6 couriers were hired to deliver various casino-related goods. You had a chip, another individual had a pair of dice, another courier had a chess piece. The more interesting dialogue is about how you weren't the first one who was asked to take the package. Instead, another courier saw your name next on the list and turned down the offer, demanding that you take it instead. I looked into it and asked around because I didn't remember this dialogue being in the original game before the DLC. The courier in question is an individual named Ulysses, who is the main antagonist of Lonesome Road, a storyline DLC that takes players into the Divide. Originally, Ulysses was going to be a recruitable companion character, but that never panned out further into development. Still, one of Obsidian's and New Vegas's greatest strengths is tying narratives together, and so getting some insight into a character from a DLC I would consider almost a second finale to the game is rather thrilling upon additional playthroughs. We'll learn more about Ulysses near the end of the video, but in the meantime we still need to ask Nash about the NCR's plans for the correctional facility, either through a bribe, which we can cheapen through bartering, or through convincing him with a speech check. I've mentioned it before, but this is one of New Vegas's greatest strengths within quests. Regardless of your skill level, there's always hidden paths or possibilities that can help you get to your desired outcome. Nash was just a means of doing this, but we could have pickpocketed a trooper like mentioned beforehand. Nash informs you that the NCR are planning a raid on the facility, which sounds a little silly when you take a second to think about it. Due to jurisdiction and chain of command, the NCR are unable to help the innocent civilians living in Primm who are openly under assault by individuals from the same facility that the NCR managed to lose due to giving dynamite to convicts. They don't have the supplies to help Primm, but do have the supplies and manpower to attack the correctional facility. It doesn't really add up, or rather it shows the motivations of the NCR, shows what's important to them, their property. The NCR doesn't own Primm. It isn't under their jurisdiction, and therefore it is of less value to them. Human life is less valuable to the NCR over the property that was taken from them, especially when said property was simply a prison used to perform slave labor on a railroad. And that's exactly what this is, slave labor. The convicts are cartoonish in a way within New Vegas, but they're still humans, still individuals, ones who don't necessarily deserve to be worked against their will. It's odd to see the Legion portrayed as villainous for owning slaves and pushing their will on the Mojave, while the NCR is doing the same thing, just under the social construct of laws and justice, rather than the social construct of an empire. Both of these individuals are inherently doing harm to humanity, but the NCR does it in a way that we, as a society, value more. We value innovation and progress, and we see that through the construction of these laws and imaginary systems we create to better control civilization. Law is made up, capitalism is made up, and we choose to accept it. And many choose to see it as naturally good because it can lead to innovation, something that many also consider naturally good. Whether innovation is truly a natural good for the evolution of the human race isn't the point of this video, but it showcases that the NCR and the Legion are much more similar than the NCR would have you seem. We just accept the NCR's will a little more than the Legion's. The NCR doesn't care about helping civilians, they care about getting their slaves back, and that's something you can help them with if you choose to. This isn't a defense for the Powder Gangers. Even with their freedom now, they still instill harm onto others. They shake down civilians, try to take down towns with violence. We've already seen this in Goodsprings and have to decide how we're going to handle their existence or if it's even our problem. These are a lot of assertions without fully expanding upon them, and that's because the politics of the NCR and their comparison to the Legion isn't the entire point of the video. Rather, I want to look at the key points throughout the game that are designed to make you question just how morally good a militant force actually is. New Vegas is a game designed around making you question the politics and militarism of our everyday lives. It's a mirror of our society that we can look into and form observations of our own. We have two options within the scope of the game. We can warn Eddie about the oncoming assault, or we can help the NCR. Warning Eddie leads to the assault taking place and no reputation lost with the NCR. However, the troopers who assault the facility will be naturally hostile to you, and engaging with them could lead to a rise in infamy. Instead, we're going to side with the NCR in this one for the sake of it, both due to the danger the Powder Gangers impose and due to the fact that they become less prevalent to the point of not mattering at all very shortly afterward. Heading over to the correctional facility and talking to Sergeant Lee will begin the assault, with NCR troopers spawning in and swarming the grounds after a breach in the gate. The only actual individual that has to be killed is Eddie, but all of the Powder Gangers along the wall will be hostile. Surprisingly, the gangers in the visitor center will not be dealt with by the NCR, even after the fighting has ceased, meaning entering it is still hostile territory, although Myers won't fight you as he is still quest relevant. With Eddie taken care of, NCR troopers will now loiter around the area. You can return to Lieutenant Hayes to deliver the news and he'll congratulate you for it, but there's still the issue with Prim, which the NCR still isn't willing to deal with despite the facility not being a factor anymore. To get more information on Benny, we need to save Deputy Beagle, who is being held hostage within the Bison Steve Hotel. There's a few ways you can enter the hotel proper. A broken down set of roller coaster tracks can allow you to get in through the upper level balcony, but the front door is as good an option as any, especially with a surplus of stealth boys and silenced weapons. Skyrim wasn't the only Bethesda game to popularize the ranged stealth build, let me tell you. Traversing the hotel is simple enough. There's a few convicts to take out along the way, and if you have the lockpicking skill for it, you can open a door that will take you straight to Beagle without needing to deal with too many hostiles. Though we'll be taking them all out anyway for the experience and items. It wouldn't be a Fallout/Elder Scrolls game without looting every corpse we come across. We can convince Beagle to tell us about Benny right then and there if we can pass the skill check for it, but most likely you'll be releasing him first and maybe convincing him to help you kill the remaining convicts. Regardless of how you did it, once Beagle is outside, he will tell you about how Benny and the cons moved on from Prim and began traveling towards the next town over, that being Nipton. We're not done in Prim just yet, however. There's still one more quest for us to take care of, as well as the ability to unlock our first companion. Prim is sheriffless, and Beagle is both unfit for the role and also refuses to take it, meaning it's up to you to find someone to take care of the town in your absence. There's three options for this, one of those being Myers from the correctional facility. Since Myers is one of the potential candidates, he isn't openly hostile to you when shit hits the fan during the raid, and regardless of your reputation with the Powder Gangers in general, in order to get Myers to take on the task of sheriff, he needs to get a pardon from the NCR. Alternatively, you can ask Hayes to have someone from the NCR take over and officially put Prim under their jurisdiction. If you've been following my views on the NCR in general up to this point, you might think both of these options sound less than desirable. Luckily, there's a more neutral alternative. Within the Vicky and Vance Casino is a Protectron known as Prim Slim, who can be reprogrammed through a science skill of 30 or with specific miscellaneous scrap items. This allows Slim to become the sheriff of the town and also leads to Beagle losing his deputy status. I'll let you figure out which option we chose. With the town considered safe, there's one more stop we can make, right by the corpse of one of the 6 couriers who has been shot dead. This specific courier was carrying the pair of dice I mentioned earlier. Within the Nash residence, which also seems to be the building for the courier service, is a damaged Enclave Eyebot named Eddie. Players can repair him with a very high repair check of 65, but can lower this with a similarly high check of science at 55. This lowers the repair check to 35. Alternatively, items can be used to repair him instead. Eddie is most likely the first companion you'll run into within Fallout New Vegas. You can have up to 2 with you at one time. 1 pet companion and 1 humanoid one. There's 2 pet companions in the game, the first being Eddie, and the first humanoid companion will be meeting shortly, although they won't be joining us immediately. An important mechanic of companions is their related quest lines that each comes with. How these are triggered and progressed is unique to each companion, and worth doing for each one due to the various rewards granted to the player, as well as upgrades to the companions themselves. Eddie, for example, has a set of logs within his file system that can be triggered via hearing specific keywords. There's plenty of NPCs that you can talk to who act as said triggers, and these logs lead into the greater quest arc for Eddie specifically. In the meantime, the next destination for you is Nipton, but there's one detour to make along the way, that being the NCR's Mojave Outpost. Around this point in the game, there's a good chance you've obtained at least one Sunset Sarsaparilla Star Cap. Like in Fallout 3, drinking soda bottles provides you with the cap that was attached to said bottle, since within the universe, caps are used as the main form of currency. Sarsaparilla is specific to Fallout New Vegas, though Nuka-Cola still exists as well. What makes Sarsaparilla special is the 5% chance of you receiving a cap with a blue star underneath it. Once the player has collected at least one of these through drinking the beverages until they find one, or finding one in the wild.
Yeah, see, I'm the opposite.
An event where a man by the name
I much prefer being high to being drunk. I do like both, so I do both. Yeah, when I say I'm smoking weed, I'm actually doing dabs. Oh, I love beer. Beer is great. Alright, let's see. Where are we? 105.32. Pin that shit. That's where we are. YouTube. Is it on my home screen? It is not. I don't really watch YouTube on, or I don't really watch Yahweh Trash on YouTube anymore, so that makes sense. Oh, it's not like actually new. I see. Okay, never mind. No more Rob Top new video.
Fallout New Vegas is
good enough.
Sarsaparilla Special is the 5% chance of you receiving a cap with a blue star underneath it. Once the player has collected at least one of these through drinking the beverages until they find one,
Gaming
or finding
time.
one in the wild, the player will trigger an event where a man by the name of Malcolm Holmes will approach them. Malcolm starts off the conversation under false pretenses. He acts as though he wants to trade with you, but this excuse quickly crumbles as he doesn't find himself to be a good liar. The true reason Malcolm approached you is because he witnessed you getting a star cap. How this is
Yeah, see,
possible
there's a
is
reason that I buy cheap-ass vodka.
where you could receive the cap that Malcolm simply couldn't have been able to be there at the same time. This requires another suspension.
I'm a
of
big fan
disbelief
of bang
the
for your
player.
buck.
You're forced to play along with the idea that Malcolm saw you
Get like
get
a
one of
huge
the
sugar
star
vodka
caps,
for
even if
like
you were inside a building.
$20.
Malcolm couldn't realistically have been in at the same time. It's a jarring occurrence and not the only time this happens. Excuses like this from the developers can temporarily pull you out of the roleplay or immersive aspect of the game, while you have to mentally justify that this is somehow a logical setup for a quest, even though it clearly is not. Malcolm gives you the rundown on the mechanics involved with star caps. There's a legend that collecting 50 of them will lead to unimaginable treasure guarded by an enigmatic individual known as Festus, who we'll meet later. People will get so riled up about the legend that they'll
Better go
actually
my phone
attack one
charger.
another if they know you have star caps. Asking Malcolm if he is a collector leads to him denying that he collects any more and ultimately wouldn't tell you if he was anyway for his own safety. That being said, killing Malcolm reveals that he does have caps on his person, so whether he collects them or not is still up in the air, but he doesn't seem too willing to give them away, suggesting that he is still actively collecting, but isn't someone who would kill another for it. I generally have this interaction with Malcolm immediately after leaving Primm, assuming I received a star bottle cap within that time. Near Primm is a highway patrol station, and within one of the cells is a corpse with a star bottle cap. Further down towards Nipton, you have the opportunity to witness an altercation between two individuals, Thomas and Jacqueline. It's up in the air who will kill who and can be different every playthrough, or determined by your intervention. Both will tell you the same story, however, that they were attacked by the other for their star bottle caps. Thomas, however, has a journal on his person which sheds a bit more light on the subject. It seems he ran into Jacqueline, who began seducing him on her travels, only to ultimately attempt taking his lucky star cap necklace, suggesting Thomas didn't actually have any knowledge of their perceived value. There's more to the star bottle cap questline once you've reached New Vegas and obtained 50 caps for yourself, but that'll be saved for further down the line with the adventure.
That
Before
sounds
reaching Nipton,
disgusting.
there's a good chance you'll make note of a large statue off into the distance of
Remind me to
two
kill
warriors
myself
with
before
NCRs,
drinking with you.
a desert ranger and an Nevada ranger, acting as a symbol of their unification into the NCR. This is in front of the Mojave Outpost, used as a base of operations for some of the NCR, as well as a stopover for caravans that want to go further south. No one's going anywhere south, however, as the roads are essentially closed. There's a lot of frustration emanating from this area, not for the player necessarily, but for the NCR and the caravaneers that are stuck there. The Mojave Outpost is understaffed. Their job is to protect the interstate and those traveling along it, but after the prison break at the NCRCF and the establishment of the outpost...
You know what? Okay, you want to know something fucking really funny I've done?
You'd think that this
I've
would mean
used
our
Bacardi
interventions
as,
within the
like...
NCRCF would lead
Do
to
you know how
the
dabs
being
work?
fully operational again, but this isn't the case. While Primm is still not under NCR jurisdiction, and while the NCRCF has been taken care of, one can reason that after the battle there's still a lot of manpower that would need to go into getting said facility operational again, meaning that the outpost at Primm may still be considered necessary even with Lieutenant Hayes leaving after everything is said and done. The lack of
cool.
manpower has led to a lot of danger surrounding the interstate further south and a backlog of caravaneers who are stuck and frustrated about
I mean,
this
it's basically like a
Joseph
bong, but you
Cassidy,
use, like,
aka Cass, is one of these frustrated
THC wax. You get that, right?
although we can't prove her just yet. Talking to Cass allows her to explain how her caravan was hit and destroyed with nothing taken, leading her to believe it was the Legion who are making more and more of a presence within the West. Now, with nothing to do and nowhere to go, she's stuck at the outpost and drinking her sorrows away, which only seems to frustrate her further. She suggests that you check out the Crimson Caravan branch south of Vegas if you're looking for work. We'll come back for Cass later, but there's a few things we can do to both boost our supply and gain some fame with the NCR. Talking to Ranger Jackson gets us a job involving exterminating some giant ants down the road. It's nothing special, but it's on the way to Nipton, and coincidentally, Ghost, a
Yeah,
sniper
anyway,
on the roof of the outpost, would like us to go
I have
recon the
used
area, considering
first
no one has been
Bacardi,
down for some time.
and then
Nipton
second
is
Mike's
more
Hard
of a
Lemonade
spectacle than an actual
as,
town.
like,
It's set up
dab
for
rig
you to
water.
arrive at and essentially witness a stage
Which-
play performed by the Legion, with this most likely being your
I don't know,
first
did I?
interaction with them upon
One
starting the game.
was
You're first met with all the
extremely
fun and
painful
entrance
for
of the
Bacardi.
Legion.
It was
Ex-powder
fine. It
command
was,
can be
I
seen
mean,
cheering in victory.
Mike still made us
Captain
cough,
Oliver has
but it
him
was
inform you
fine.
that he's won the lottery, but doesn't go into much detail
The
for
Bacardi was
before
extremely
having gone
painful,
out of the town. Right beside the two of you
but
is
it
the
did work.
general store.
Like,
Inside is
we
another
did
cocktail
get
bar
fucking
where
crossed
Fox
just by
Sports
smoking
was
with
forced
fucking
to
Bacardi
permanently
and
sit
thing.
down due to having
But
experience
it was
with
painful as
great
fuck.
gamers. What
Uh,
exactly
would not
happened
recommend.
here?
It was funny.
Rockstar explains that he
We were
and
already
other
fucked up, that's how
powder
the idea
gamers arrived
happened.
at the town and made a deal with the mayor to hold travelers hostage and essentially strip them for everything that they have before turning them loose.
With Mike's, it still makes you cough a little bit, but it's like you can deal with it, and it still does get you like tipsy.
Partake in saw this as an opportunity to make some money by essentially trapping travelers who showed up for it. But then what happened to Boxcar and the rest of the town? Enter the Legion and the Lottery. The town was taken over by Legion forces, and as an act of judgment on the town, Vulpes Inculta, the leader of the group of scouts and spies known as the Frumentarii, handed out lottery tickets to every individual within Nipton at the time. First came the lucky losers, who would die a quick death if their number was called.
So what are you doing now?
This was crucifixion for those called next. It's important to point out that this isn't exactly like the popularized imagery of the crucifixion of Christ. For the most part it is, but the developers seem to have opted for tying individuals to a cross rather than nailing them to it. And this is still fairly accurate to the capital punishment that took place all the way back in the 6th century
I do have
before
water.
Christ. There's nothing you can do for the individuals at the time. All of the NPCs on crosses within Nipton are so near death that to remove them would be to simply kill
There's
them
some bed
anyway.
swag.
So you can choose to leave them up there to die slowly or put them
Well,
out
I
of
appreciate
misery.
you
It's your call, and ultimately
watching
doesn't
my
affect any part of
random
the
fucking
narrative.
Borderlands
It would've
stream
been
while I
an
do the same
interesting
thing
choice
over
to
and
give the
over,
player in terms
instead of, like,
karma and where the developers think the
an actually
mercy
interesting
killing
video.
lands on the karmic
That's
dial,
pretty cool
if
of you to
can
do.
even classify it as that. Remaining civilians were killed, enslaved, and Boxcar, who was second place, was ultimately set free, but not before having his legs broken with hammers. Oliver was then essentially the true winner of this system, being the last one standing. So you can better understand why he was so happy to be free and less
I'm not like
interested
I
in
mean,
being classified as a power
I am
figure any longer.
being
As a
sarcastic,
side
but I'm
note,
also
you
not
can
joking.
attack Boxcar here, and he will simply stand up from his chair, fully able to walk and attack you. It's not that he was lying, but more that this just didn't seem to be accounted for by the developers. I'm sure they knew about it, but most likely didn't care. We want Boxcar alive anyway, as he is a key NPC within a side quest, one that
I feel like the
sure
Subway
will feature
Surfers in the top
continue.
left probably
Approaching
helps,
the town
but yeah.
center, you're met with the Legion, who have control over Nipton currently, with Vulpes Inculta, the leader among them. You can fully converse with the character, as he has bigger plans for you at the time. And
Should I
attacking
make-
that many
Oh yeah,
Legion
here's a
at
question.
once is less than likely to end
Should
up
I make the
badly.
live
Vulpes
Troy Smith
explains his
reaction like
motivations for the actions that took
smaller,
place in
so
the
like
city,
the text
calling
is
the town
smaller and
wars that
more
had no moral
up to the
standing
thing,
for
so
individuals that
you can
walked
see more
through
of it
it
at a
or
time, and it's less
partook in
covering the
services.
screen.
This gives us a bit of an outlook into Legion values. Caesar's Legion centers around purity and being holier than thou, seeing acts of weakness and cowardice as things that need to be punished, and determining it is their duty to punish those that fall under these categories. While many saw Nipton
Make
as
it
a
smaller and
cesspool,
faster?
but
Okay.
ultimately not a danger or
I was
problem,
thinking,
the
I was
Legion seems
watching
to
back the
prioritize
clip, and I was like,
one
that text
they
is
don't
kind
want
of
to see spread, and one they
larger
feel
than it
moral
looked in the
obligation
OBS
to seek
preview.
out, in such a way that no one should ever try it again. They hate cowardice and weakness, but look to instill fear into the people of the Mojave, to exert their will, absorb communities by any means necessary, and ultimately punish those who fight back to the point that they no longer exist. It's oddly contradictory. The Legion cares about strength and purity, but kills those who don't fight back and kills those who do in an incredibly violent
I do think it's too
manner
big on the
to
screen,
send a
so
message.
I will
What the
do that.
Legion really seems to care about, or what Kaiser himself may seem to care about, is power. And to obtain that power and to create an empire, he has used violence, totalitarianism, and brainwashing/intimidation to exert his will. And those in power within his regime have drunk the Kool-Aid. Those who don't either don't rise through the ranks or get punished to the point that it will most likely lead to their death, if not intense physical punishment. Remember how I said that the Legion is inherently evil? This is what I'm talking about. They are meant to stand as a moral contrast to the NCR, even though we can see some similar structure between the two. Both the NCR and the Legion utilize slavery. Both the NCR and the Legion exert their will and take what they want by force. The Legion will commit atrocity after atrocity to send a message, and the NCR will do little to help those individuals unless they are under their jurisdiction. You may not think the NCR are as bad as the Legion, which I believe to be true as well, but the comparison shows you the cracks of the NCR's moral high ground, how they are not an inherent good within the Mojave, but may not be an inherent evil necessarily either. Well, except for the slaves. They do have slaves, and that's pretty evil in my eyes. Vulpes instructs the player to deliver a message to the NCR back at the Mojave outpost, specifically
How's
that
that?
they are here in the Mojave despite not having control of the dam and
Let me
its
know.
flooding.
I'll let
He
it go
wants
for
you
like
to
a
instill
run.
fear
Let me know
into
if
the
you
hearts
want
of
it
the
higher than
NCR
that.
with this news of what happened in Nipton, how the town outnumbered the Legion but all were too scared to fight back against them, simply waiting and hoping that their time would not come in terms of the lottery, something Vulpes sees as an unforgivable weakness, and also how he views the rest of the Mojave. The psychological factors that go into people standing up to an oppressive regime are not so easily labeled as weakness, even from a man that gets erect when he burns a mayor alive on a tire fire. There's not much more to do within the outpost. We can pass Vulpes' message along, which forces this one NPC to go down a depressive spiral. We can report back to Ghost, who is sorry to hear about Nipton, and we can report back to Jackson, who will give us a service rifle. With Nipton out
Faster?
of the way, we
Alright.
need to keep moving further down the I-15 to find Benny, and this will take us to a new town and our first human companion. Heading to Novak is when you'll most likely start running into various patrols around the wasteland, specifically NCR
I could
legionary
make-
patrols, but also
I'm
group
not going to.
operations and
I could make the video
Legionaries
scroll. It would look
are
really
open
funny.
hostile
I'm not going to
anyone,
though.
including you, depending on your fame and infamy with them. By this
Can make
point,
the fucking
you
gameplay
most
scroll.
likely haven't done
Can make
anything
anything
to
scroll.
openly aggravate them, meaning they won't be hostile towards you, but that shouldn't matter. The Legion patrols the Mojave and attacks anyone on site, regardless of if they are NCR or simply merchants.
Maybe with like
You
some
will
GD
consider
stream, I'll
as
make the
much a
gameplay
neutral
scroll.
party as a doctor,
I'm not gonna do it with
police
this
are
though, in
not
case I
targeted
actually
at
get like a
First
really good
interaction
roll,
with
and then the
Vulpes
footage
made
is just
sense. He
ruined.
had a task for us, and he let us live to complete said task. But these patrols realistically shouldn't know who you are.
Alright, let's
nor
try this.
care by this point. If the Legion is pushing into the Mojave, capturing civilians, creating slaves, and attacking
That
the
seems good to
NCR,
me.
you should be just as much a target as the rest, especially since you most likely have NCR fame by this point. This isn't a huge detrimental flaw within the reputation system, and you'll see later that we end up pissing off the Legion anyway and immediately rectify the situation. The only real issue here is their seeming neutrality towards you doesn't seem to make a ton of sense based on what we have been presented within the setting of New Vegas.
Actually, I'm probably gonna make it a little slower than that. That's 400. I think I'm gonna make it 350.
It was originally occupied by the NCR, but ultimately attacked by the Legion, who set off some sort of radiation bomb that heavily irradiated the entire area, both causing feral ghouls to spawn as well as hostile NCR ghouls on top of them.
Should I make it all the
So
same
it's
font, or should I leave it
and there's a few ways
with the
to
fucking
deal with
fire
that,
and
but
the
before entering the town proper, players can enter the
Jacksepticeye
cellar of the
Skate
local church and
3
run into several
thumbnail
scavengers
font?
who are looking around in there. Logan, the leader of the group, informs you that he's looking for radiation suits so that they can pillage the town and ask for your help if you are computer.
It's either gonna
science
be
away. A minimal
this
science
or
check
all
will
Skate
allow
3
you to hack
thumbnail.
into the nearby computer and see that a shipment of radiation suits were ultimately taken around Nipton by individuals who didn't look like NCR troops. This is where Boxcar comes in.
Make
to
it
play, and
5,000.
ultimately the reason he hasn't
No
been killed
thanks.
yet, if that's what you're looking to do. Boxcar is the only one left alive who saw the shipment and takes you along the way.
All Jacksepticeye? Alright, I'll do that after the stream.
Individual suit for yourself. You can bring these suits back to the scavengers and ultimately take them with you while shooting your way through the town. You make 2 stops along the way, one in the local police station and one in the local fire department, looking to grab items and miscellaneous parts labeled as NCR. Once you've found everything, the group turns on you and you ultimately have to kill them. There's not much to this quest. I most likely wouldn't have
Yeah, the
even
2
mentioned
fonts
it
made
because
more
it's
sense
such
when
a
it was,
large
like,
town
vertical.
leading up to Novak, as well as the boxcar I mentioned previously. It's an excuse to make your way through an irradiated town. There's even a giant rad scorpion fight to go through if that's your thing. You can tell that there is no real layering or choice to the quest that is missing here, since killing Logan doesn't fail the quest like Boxcar would have, but instead completes it. There's a few other quests relating to Searchlight we'll go over later on in the journey, but one can be completed now. All of those ghouls you've been working with Logan and the gang were NCR soldiers, and as such,
You wanna know
have
something
dog
funny?
tags attached to their person. The player can talk to someone Astor about the
Because
radiation
I'm not
Searchlight
going to
you
explain the
asked to
details
dog
in any
tags
way.
of all of those
I live in America. Because of Jacksepticeye, I met someone who lives in Germany when I was like 11 or 12, and we have met in real life.
Novak, or no vacancy if you didn't see that on the sign before entering the
Kind of
town,
funny.
community centered around a motel and a tourist attraction, Giant T-Rex. Asking around about Benny points you towards one of said snipers, a man named Manny Vargas, but there's something we can do within the town before that. Talking to No Bark, the resident crazy person, if you can call him that.
I don't like. I mean, I don't know. He annoys me nowadays, but he used to not. Yeah, I really liked him when he didn't.
That this happens almost every night around midnight, and taking the time to watch the cattle around midnight allows you to witness the approach of a Nightkin concealed by a stealth boy. Nightkin are a type of super mutant, individuals that have been turned into whole.
Yeah, it's nothing like. We're literally just friends. It's nothing past that.
Nightkin specifically are super mutants addicted to stealth boys, and prolonged use of stealth boys have
So, yeah.
led to even more neurological issues within the Nightkin specifically, including schizophrenia, which
That was
we will
funny.
get an example of later. By killing the Nightkin and informing the ranchers that their cattle is now safe, you'll gain enough fame in Novak to be recognized by the population. In fact, talking to Jeannie Mae Crawford, who runs the motel, you can get her room for free due to your reputation. There's still plenty to do here, however. Talking to Manny about Benny, for example, we'll have Manny ask us to help him out first as a means of trade. Turns out there's an infestation of ghouls at the local Repcon facility.
Yeah, his older. I don't really do it that much anymore. Maybe I should, but I used to go back and watch his old videos. Every once in a while, I go back and watch like the whole Markiplier Five Nights at Freddy's playlist.
But he has some work for us before that's possible. Boone has lost his wife. She lived in Novak with him, but ultimately was taken away by slavers. He knows this to be true, and so this isn't an investigation about what happened to her, but rather an investigation into who set it up. He asks you, an impartial stranger to the community, to begin looking into it, as it should raise less suspicion this way. Boone gives you his beret, and asks you to bring an individual you believe to be the culprit to the front of the Giant T-Rex with his beret equipped. This will be the signal that they are the culprit, and he will take care of the rest. Asking around about Boone's wife informs you that she was essentially hyper-privileged and let people know it.
How? He's so loud.
And wealth, and living in Novak wasn't in any way what she was used to.
Oh, this is a pretty good one. Zero accuracy, so. But this is pretty good.
Handle the harsh life of the Mojave, but that doesn't change the fact that it may rub some of the other civilians the wrong way, and ultimately seem to be what led to her demise. While this may have been the cause, this doesn't mean it was deserved, especially when the individuals that purchased her were members of the Legion. The easiest way to find the true culprit is to head into the reception area of the motel, where there's a safe that can be picked. Alternatively, you can steal the key from Crawford. Inside of the safe is a bill of sale, acting as evidence for the sale of Boone's wife between Crawford and the Legion. You can bring Crawford to the front of the Giant T-Rex at night, equip the beret, and then watch as her head explodes via Boone shooting her dead. There's a few things that point to Crawford being the culprit, mostly how hostile she can become when the town is talked down on in the slightest. This is something you can see right away when talking to her for the first time and have the ability to apologize for. With it so easy to set Crawford off, it'd be no surprise that she was the one to orchestrate the events.
I know, like AVGN, I've seen a few of his videos, but I never really like watched him, you know?
But ultimately reasons why she is the way she is, through the tough transitional period of privilege to the harsh reality of the wastes. The only other suspect is Manny, who was known to be openly hostile and argumentative with Boone's wife, to the point that Boone and Manny had a falling out within their friendship. Since there's two major suspects, the only way to be sure is via hard evidence, which we get with the bill of sale. It's an interesting quest, and ultimately allows you to do a bit of asking around and detective work before snooping around. You even have the freedom to frame some of the inhabitants of Novak and have them murdered instead, but this leads to a karma loss and ultimately locks Boone out of being a companion. Speaking of that, returning to Boone allows you to explain to him how you knew it was Crawford and then ask what he will do from here. You can offer for him to travel with you and speed up the process with a high intelligence check that mentions how snipers work in pairs. This is a good point to discuss a few more mechanics about companions.
Cool.
First are their bonuses, with Boone offering the spotter perk and Eddie offering the enhanced sensors perk, both of which are fairly useful moving forward. Players have access to these perks as long as their companions are in their party. Spotter causes enemies to glow red when using iron sights, and enhanced sensors essentially gives the player a 10 in perception, allowing them to notice both hostile and non-hostile NPCs on their HUD from the maximum distance possible. It also allows you to target cloaked enemies and bats, which is normally not possible and will force a 0% chance to hit if you try. I mentioned earlier how Eddie has a set of triggers that will unlock playback of logs he has saved on his drive. One of those triggers is from Old Lady Gibson at Gibson Scrapyard, and we'll be stopping there during our quest to clear out the ghouls within the Repcon facility. Boone, on the other hand, is more complicated. He has a mechanic known as history points. Players that have Boone in the party and complete certain tasks will get a predetermined set of points, with 5 being necessary to unlock his companion quest and relative upgrades. Boone hates the Legion as an ex-member of the NCR and for what they did to his wife. Doing things like completing certain anti-Legion quests and helping the NCR against the Legion in specific quests can help build his history points throughout your journey. This game even lets you kill the Legion leader Kaiser at any point you being fed, and that alone gives you 2 history points with Boone. There's one major flaw with this mechanic, however. The individual has to be in your party when you complete these tasks, and said tasks may not be completely obvious in terms of offering these points. If you don't recruit Boone, or if
That's
you
not
have
bad.
a companion with you at the
No
time,
secondary,
and
though.
complete all of the possible events that would raise his history with you, you ultimately lock yourself out of his progression quests. Ultimately, it's understandable why they decided to do it this way. If the individuals aren't with you, how would they see your actions and ultimately build rapport with you? But for gameplay's sake, I think there needed to be some sort of alternative here. If you clear a camp of legionaries for the NCR, or if you are the person to kill the leader of the Legion, you should be able to at least convey that through dialogue and maybe evidence to Boone so that he can still build up to his side quest. Before heading out to Repcon, you may be surprised to run into Victor, the cowboy Securitron here. Victor doesn't know why he's here when you ask, simply feeling compelled to travel the path towards New Vegas, and essentially meaning you will see him on your travels as you progress as well. Additionally, Novak is home to one of the first unique weapons you may find on your playthrough, that gun. Unique weapons are generally a completely new weapon or a reimagining of existing weapons with several bonuses. That gun, for example, offers an incredibly high critical boost, but was ultimately difficult to repair without the jury rigging perk or the release of the Gunrunner's Arsenal DLC, as there was no weapon similar enough to it that it could be broken down. The Repcon test site is for testing rockets specifically, and comically designed ones at that. It's also infested with both ghouls and Nightkin, as you will see shortly. You can find several corpses along the way of ghouls and rogues and Nightkin. At the entrance of the site are several feral ghouls that can be taken care of before heading inside. Once inside, you are immediately met with the voice of one sounding like a ghoul over an intercom, who gives you instructions to reach a point in the facility where you will meet them. Not all ghouls are feral.
I should drink more water.
Several of them remain sentient and can live through radiation as well as many years longer than typical humans. Making your way through
So I can hit my fucking pen more and immediately fuck up my throat.
Building and up multiple staircases to find the hiding spot of several.
Do you have to clear your throat a lot when you hit your pen, or is it just me?
Chris Haversam is a unique individual due to him believing he is a ghoul, while clearly being perceived by everyone else as a human, even by the ghouls surrounding him. Further into the back of this area is Jason Bright, a sentient glowing one. Ghouls so full of radiation that they glow a green light. Jason is seen as a messiah to the ghouls surrounding him.
Alright, I guess I'm just broken.
In what could ultimately be considered a religion, or more so a cult if you want to be overly pessimistic about it. Thoughts on religion versus cults aside, Jason clearly believes in what he preaches, that being visions he has for the far beyond,
maybe.
a created sanctuary for him and all of his followers where they will get to live in peace. Jason sees you and Chris as individuals sent to him by an enigmatic figure known as
What brands do you like?
who will help him and his flock essentially make it to the far beyond. The main reason Jason needs your help currently is because he and his group are trapped within the upper levels of the facility due to demons, those being several Nightkin who attacked them on site. One of said demons interacted with their group through the intercom and told them to stay put for their own safety. They've been stuck up there ever since, and Jason is asking for your help in solving the situation by any means necessary. Heading into the basement, the player will run into several hostile Nightkin unless they take a more stealthy approach. In fact, Taking out too many
Another
Nightkin
drop,
along
beer.
the way locks the player out of resolving the conflict via
Although if you have like
peaceful
strong
approach. As you
opinions on
progress through the
bottled water,
basement,
I
you
would
will
love to
come
hear
into
them.
contact with a non-hostile Nightkin by the name
Bad
of
drop.
Davison. While not
Over.
hostile, Davison is still suffering from the effects of the Stealth Boys, to the point that he believes a nearby deer skull named Antler can talk to him. Antler appears to be the reasoning side of Davison personified into an inanimate object, a way for his rational thought to be conveyed to him. Antler informs Davison that the player may be of use to them, as they were informed through a shipping manifest that there is a large shipment of Stealth Boys delivered here. There's only one room left for them to search, but it is being guarded by several traps and a ghoul who is hostile towards the Nightkin and has killed several of them. Additionally, if you kill too many Nightkin along the way, which you will likely be forced to if caught, Davison will be openly hostile with you and lock you out of further peaceful progression, as I mentioned previously. This might sound like an annoying requirement for you as a player, especially if you haven't been leveling
Okay,
up
well
your
that's lame.
stealth
Like,
stat, but the developers accounted for this. You're in a testing
Can't
facility
bounce off
full of
that.
dead Nightkin. It makes sense that you would find several Stealth Boys along your exploration through the facility, and that's exactly what happens. The player can grab several Stealth Boys specifically to help them with this task and prevent them from running into the Nightkin before they are no longer hostile. Davison gives you a key to the last room to search, and upon entering, you're met with Harland, a ghoul mercenary who doesn't necessarily buy into all of Jason's religious mumbo-jumbo, but ultimately appreciated the company and through his own omission seemed to protect the group so he could sleep with all the women there. After the initial attack of the Nightkin on the ghouls, Harland and several others were pushed into the basement where they ran into even more Nightkin, thus sealing their fate. However, Harland managed to make his way into the room at hand and ultimately seal himself in with several traps scattered about. Harland also refuses to leave unless you do something for him, that being finding out if one of his friends is still alive after getting kidnapped and jailed by the Nightkin. The answer is she
I don't know.
isn't, and an effective use of Stealth Boys will
Anyway,
allow you
answer
to
the
force
beer
the
question,
villain
which is the
ultimately
one I
kill
was
the
actually
jailer to get a
asking.
key and find their dead body. Once you deliver the bad news to Harland, he'll abscond, but you also could have simply killed him and been done with it. It's up to you as a player. Regardless, you can now navigate over all of Harland's traps to reach the shipping log computer and find out that the Stealth Boys were sent in error and ultimately returned to sender. Informing Davison of this irritates him, but Antler believes you and the Knight can ultimately leave peacefully. Returning to Jason has all of the ghouls, including any ferals you didn't kill within the interior of Repcon, head into the basement and towards the launch pad of 3 rockets that Jason plans to use to launch him and his flock to the far beyond. Now, it should be noted that Jason's feelings about this are genuine, but it should also be noted that this is the dumbest idea from any NPC potentially within the entirety of New Vegas. It's so unimaginably stupid to think that these rockets are going to go anywhere other than the ground. Well, they'll fly, but not very far and not for very long. The ghouls also get these silly spaceman suits, and you can pick one up for yourself as well. Talking to Jason here allows you to inquire a little bit more into Chris. Originally, the ghouls tried to convince Chris that he was human, but ultimately failed in doing so. After realizing how technologically adept he was, they planned to allow him to work for them under the assumption that he would be joining them, but the radiation surrounding the launch and expected to be within the far beyond would kill him, meaning Jason has lied to Chris about all of this. You can choose to chew Jason out about using Chris, but ultimately, in my opinion, this is what Chris always wanted, and you can convince him of this fact after breaking the bad news to him. A speech check of 50 lets you get through to Chris about the fact that he is truly human. In fact, the only reason he believed he was a ghoul was because he grew up in a vault and was bullied. Ultimately, it was the loss of his hair that acted as the final straw that broke
Corona,
the
fair enough.
and had him go
Corona's
through
alright.
goblin mode, or ghoul mode. Chris is pretty livid about this revelation because he feels used, but Jason didn't mean any ill will towards him over this, to the point that the ghouls revere Chris as a saint in their eyes, and you can convince him of this and also convince him to move to Novak after all is said and done. There's some maintenance to be done on the rockets before they can launch. In particular, Chris needs thruster modules designed specifically for the rockets, as well as Isotope 239.
Fair enough.
The thruster modules are easily found within Gibson's scrapyard. You can pay for them, barter for them, or use a perk to get them for free. You can also simply steal them after picking a lock. Since Gibson is the first person we talk to with the Eddie trigger, this will begin his first recording. The Isotope is a little more open-ended. The giant T-Rex shop in Novak actually has several rocket ships which contain some sort of irradiated component. 5 of these rocket toys will be enough to continue the quest, and this is usually how I go about it. However, you can
Yeah, I'm just streaming the same thing that I do.
and find a isotope out in the open.
By myself.
Turning these items to Chris allows him to get the rockets ready to fly. If you went the other route and allowed Chris's rage to lead to revenge, you could instead gather items to sabotage the rockets, but we're nice people.
I figure I might as well. It's kind of fun.
Once everything is set up, you can head to the launch pools and order them to start the process. An intelligence of 4 or less will allow you to mash the buttons on the machine until you ultimately sabotage the launch. A science skill of 55 or higher will allow you to actually improve the launch slightly, though this doesn't really matter outside of a karma bonus. Once the launch is complete, Chris will head to Novak and you'll gain a large chunk of fame with the people there. Talking to Manny will complete the quest and have him divulge that Benny and the Khans were headed to Boulder City, further north of here, giving you your next destination. It's good to talk to Benny about Boone here, as he will explain their history as snipers of the NCR, as well as the massacre of Bitter Springs, which is required dialogue to start Boone's companion quest later on down the line. We'll talk about Boone's past more as we come to it. In the meantime, we're going to head north. Boulder City is a decent distance away from your current location, and there's a few key areas worth stopping by before we
As
get
long as
there,
I have
namely
like
Nelson,
one person willing to
Warren
watch,
Hope,
I'm
and
perfectly happy to
Helios
stream.
1. Nelson is a mining town taken over by the Legion after they fought off the NCR in the Battle of Nelson in 2281. Now the town is used as an outpost for the Legion and also a location where they keep NCR prisoners. Approaching the town has
more
you
fun
stop
than
by
not
an
streaming.
NCR ranger named Milo, who needs help in sneaking in or around Nelson in order to put several crucified NCR soldiers out of their misery as a mercy killing. If you recall the Nipton section, I talked about the concept of mercy killing the settlers and powder gangers who were crucified within the town, and how the developers may look to explore that or place it on the karmic dial. Luckily for you, this is the exact quest that looks to explore this. While the individuals in Nipton were too near death to save, there's more you can do for the NCR prisoners within Nelson. Despite not being able to dissuade Milo in his plan, Milo's thought process makes sense. He has troopers with him, but as he is a ranger, he has no leverage over them, and the troopers are too green and terrified of conflict to be of any help anyway. Saving the prisoners is too dangerous for one or even two individuals,
Apparently.
with the game not accounting for the fact that you have Boone and Eddie by your side. Considering how the Legion treats their prisoners through violent torture and slavery, Milo believes that the only course
There's
of action is to
couple
put
people who I
settlers out of
actually know
misery,
who
and
watch
this
who
is
also watch
therefore
the
the
stream,
only thing
but-
you can agree to if you plan on helping him. Milo agrees to cover you while you go down there and put an end to the lives of the NCR prisoners, but Boone can comment on how you should forget that plan and simply save the prisoners while taking out any
My average
gets
view
in the
count is
way,
like
and
2
this
if it's
is
not
possible.
GD.
No matter how stealthy you are, however, the minute you save one prisoner from crucifixion,
Actually, it's
you
probably
will
closer to 1 than
immediately
2.
targeted by Legion soldiers in the area, leading to a firefight. You don't have to worry about the prisoners in this quest after saving them though, as it's you and only you who are targeted by the Legion's attack. This quest is pretty straightforward. You can either save the prisoners at the cost of a firefight or quietly put them down. The end rewards of the quest don't really change based on your actions, but this quest
And
does
it's completely
provide history
expected, I'm
points
not
with Boone, those being
complaining
1
about
point
it.
for killing them and 2 for rescuing them. New Vegas normally does a good job of putting you in a hard-to-choose situation when it
See
comes
the
to
guy in
doing
chat?
the right thing. Sure, you can save the NCR
I don't know, he
prisoners,
talked
but
once
they're
on
in
the
the
name.
middle of a well-guarded settlement, at least in theory.
Maybe he left.
Mechanically, outside of
Hard to say.
role-playing reasons, saving the prisoners is
YouTube is
incredibly easy and
incredibly
easy.
bad at
Players
tracking
simply
who's
need to
actually in
interact
chat,
with each of the
so-
team and untie them. From that point, they're flagged as saved. More difficult is keeping the prisoners safe, and the actual threat of the Legion in the settlement would have provided a more impactful decision for the player, as keeping 3 unarmed NPCs alive against a large number of Legion soldiers would be much
Hey,
more
cool.
difficult.
Look at that.
Returning to Milo allows him to mention how you're a hero and he has some egg on his face. Within the actual setting of the game, Milo is pretty justified in not wanting to engage against such
It
opposing
sucks.
numbers, so he takes it on the chin when congratulating you. Completing this quest along with everything else we've done for the NCR nets you enough points to be recognized by the NCR, and this is a good time to point out how we have been doing a lot for them. While
Can you do me
simultaneously
a favor?
doing nothing
Go
all
look
for
at the
them.
last live
The
stream I
Legion is an
did.
interactive faction in New
How many
Vegas,
drops
so
did
we
I get in
quest
it?
for them and gain fame, but due to our choices thus far, we
It'll be in
have
the
a
title.
high level of infamy for them that we get an opportunity to absolve later on, and we'll use that as an opportunity to interact with the Legion slightly and explore their methodology and quest design before ultimately moving on from them. In the meantime, there's many more opportunities to deal with the NCR, as they are the prevalent force within the Mojave. Nelson is directly tied to Camp Forlorn Hope, an NCR base of operations not far north of the settlement. Stopping by with our current fame allows the NPCs to welcome us us with open arms, happy to see someone that has been such a useful friend of the NCR show up at the time we did, especially since there's so much going wrong at the camp at the moment. What's most interesting about this location is the morale system. The main questline, Restoring Hope, tasks you with completing various assignments that culminate with an assault on Nelson in order to take it back from the Legion. The morale system is raised by completing local quests in the camp that can raise the morale from 0 to a necessary maximum of 9. The more morale the player has by the climax of Restoring Hope, the stronger their forces will be when retaking Nelson. It's a good way of conveying progress to the player, watching the camp go from being a rundown mess of tired soldiers to a little better off and even successful in why they're there to begin with. In the main quest proper, you first tasked with finding a lost supply shipment that didn't make it to the camp and are directed towards Helios 1 to find out more information about it. You can talk to Lieutenant Haggerty there for more information on the shipment, but it's ultimately unnecessary as you can find the shipment not far off surrounded by dead NCR troops. Picking up the supplies triggers an ambush that you have to fight your way out of before returning the supplies to the camp. Following this, the next task is to help Dr. Richards with several wounded soldiers in the nearby medical tent. What's nice about this section is that you can complete everything easily with a high enough medical check, up to a maximum of 75, I believe. With the check being so high, there's an alternative involving the use of various medical equipment, most of which can be found around the tent. The only thing you can't find in there is 1 super stim pack and 2 out of the 3 required medics. Luckily, I ended up remembering seeing some medics near the RepCon entrance, and I had plenty of super stims from, I'm assuming, the DLC. After some backtracking, it's fairly simple to save each of the patients. You can attempt to help the patients through medicine with a low skill, but will ultimately end up killing them in the process. These 2 major tasks are the only thing you need to complete before being sent off to Nelson for an assault. But as mentioned, you can raise the morale of the camp through several other tasks that aren't part of the Restoring Hope questline. I didn't opt to do that here, and even with simply succeeding in the main quest, we still have enough troops to be more than enough, especially since you've already dealt with Nelson yourself earlier. Once you've taken out the Legion leader within Nelson, you can report back to the camp for gaining experience. This is also around when you may receive an NCR radio for having such high fame with them. The radio can be used to give you a temporary follower who can die unlike your normal companions. It's usually for things like assassination attempts or when accidentally running into raiding parties, but overall the NPCs are so slow to show up that the fight is usually over by the time they get there. Moving on to Helios 1, we get our first introduction to a faction known as the Followers of the Apocalypse. The facility is a giant solar plant at a glance, but there's a bit more to it than that, with the NCR ultimately fighting for the location against the Brotherhood of Steel, who fought tooth and nail to keep it before being pushed to retreat. Lieutenant Haggerty points out how the plant isn't generating as much power as it's worth in guarding it, especially after taking it from the Brotherhood of Steel, a faction known for their proficiency in old world energy weaponry. Heading inside allows you to meet with Ignacio of the Followers of the Apocalypse. You can talk to him and convince him that you're a neutral party, which makes him more comfortable in divulging information to you. Ignacio is only there out of curiosity. He observes that the Brotherhood fought harder than you would expect to hold this facility when it is seemingly only a power plant, and there are documents and logs suggesting there's more to the plant than just that. If the Brotherhood were here and defending it as they did, there's most likely weaponry involved, and Ignacio would like to see the plant up and running again in order to stop the NCR.
I'll play it later, man. Don't feel like GD.
Could potentially be too dangerous. Ignacio mentions a keyword that keeps coming up, Archimedes, and we will see this name come up again shortly. Ignacio isn't the one in charge though. That's actually an individual by the name of Fantastic, who somehow convinced his way into the position despite being a drug addict with no real experience with the job. Talking to Fantastic informs you that the charging mirrors are misaligned currently, meaning that the plant is working at minimal productivity. By getting 2 terminals outside to talk to the mainframe in the tower, we can then head to the tower and align the mirrors to begin producing a large amount of electricity. Fantastic mentions that if you are to head to the mainframe, make sure to send the power to the right place, and there's a few choices for that we can look into when we get there. But Fantastic wants power diverted to the New Vegas Strip and the NCR's Camp McCarran, as this is what will get him paid. Each of the terminals has their own issue in terms of being interacted with. The first terminal is covered in traps, and the second one one has rabid NCR dogs that attack on sight, though killing them won't result in fame
Yeah, that'll
lost.
happen.
Once both
Holy
terminals are
shit.
set and talking to the mainframe, you can head inside the tower, but before that it's good practice to grab all of the
Alright,
scrap
then
papers lying around, as they can be used later when we finally interact with the boomers. The issue with the tower itself is that its defense mechanisms
Probably
are
goes a bit soon
online,
as well.
and there's both turrets and robots for you to either fight against or disable on your way to the elevator that will take you to the mainframe. Once through, there's still the issue of fixing the connection to the mainframe, and this can be done in a few ways, either by fixing the generator or powering up a nearby robot to fix it for you. Once the mainframe is fixed, we can choose where to divert power, with the options being McCarran and Strip, which is the NCR option, Fremont and Westside, which would power the poorer areas of New Vegas, the full region, which gives power to everyone but leads to frequent brownouts, or the full region at emergency output levels, which will overload Helios 1 and make it non-functional. Finally, there is the Archimedes 2 option, which will divert the power to the space satellite but has a giant laser attached to it. For the sake of bringing it up later, we're going to choose the Archimedes option. This is good for the retrospective, but also pleases Ignacio, as the NCR will stop poking around and he has no idea where the power actually gets diverted to. Personally, I would normally choose the full region option, as this is the most good you can do within the quest in my opinion, and also allows you to get the most rewards from Ignacio. No matter which option you choose outside of overloading the plant, you can choose to also arm the facility's defense systems, which will fire a giant laser down onto all of the NCR below, leading to a large infamy gain and no real rewards. This is kind of like the Megaton choice in Fallout 3, where you decide whether or not you will nuke the town, but ultimately this is more of a side option overall rather than the crux moral choice we saw in the previous game. We're gonna put a pin in Helios 1 for now, but we aren't far off from learning what we've just accomplished there and how it can help us in the future. Now it's time to continue on to Boulder City and see if we can finally track down Benny. During the Battle of Hoover Dam, Legion soldiers were led into Boulder City by the NCR as a trap before the NCR ultimately blew it up. It's considered one of the more major events to take place during the battle, and a lot of NCR soldiers lost their lives during the conflict. In particular, you run into one soldier, Private Kowalski, who lost his brother while attempting to save civilians. Kowalski hangs out in front of a memorial that looks to honor those lost in the battle, including his brother. An interesting mechanic that you may not expect is the ability to shoot at the memorial only to be reprimanded by Kowalski. You have the ability to speech check your way out of this, but Kowalski doesn't seem like he'll talk to you further afterwards. Further into the town is Lieutenant Monroe, who isn't letting anyone into the city's core due to a standoff between the NCR and several members of the Great Khans. NCR troopers heading from Novak came under fire by the Khans and ultimately were taken hostage. Now reinforcements are attempting to get them back, but fear that the Khans will simply kill the hostages if they advance. You can offer to help with the situation, which Monroe will agree to, but not before pointing out he has no idea who you are. I was taken a little aback by this dialogue due to our involvement back at Camp Forlorn Hope. The developers seem to take care in making sure that the player is recognized for their efforts when helping a specific faction, to the point that the NCR quests may have additional dialogue where the individuals you interact with recognize you, but this isn't the case here. To Monroe, you're nobody, and he's never heard of you or your exploits, despite the fact that several people high up the chain do. It seems like an oversight on the developer's part, but you can explain away the issue by assuming Monroe was a little too busy to know about one do-gooder in the Mojave Wastes. Regardless, Monroe accepts your help, and you get to enter into the town proper as a neutral third party. Technically, there's a lot you can do here depending on how you want to handle things, especially since the Khans involved within this conflict are some of the ones who dug your grave and ultimately were complicit in your attempted murder. You essentially have three major options here. We either free the hostages via negotiation, free them through violence, or kill the NCR to help the Khans. Considering you've been chasing after the Khans and Benny for all of this time, it makes sense to at least interact with them first before making your decision. Heading into the Khan hideout brings you face to face with Jessup, who was eagerly awaiting your demise in the opening cutscene in New Vegas. He's justifiably shocked to see you here, as you are effectively a ghost he watched die back in Goodsprings. One of the other Khans seen in the cutscene, McMurphy, is also in the hideout, but ultimately seems to have succumbed to his wounds, implied to have been inflicted by the NCR. Talking to Jessup, you can ask him a bit about the Platinum Chip and Benny. Ultimately, Benny betrayed the Khans and ran off with the chip before paying them, and Jessup has no actual idea what the chip is or what it's supposed to do, questioning why someone would make one out of platinum. Benny apparently has made his way back to the Strip, and this is ultimately our final destination in terms of locating him. This doesn't mean we're going to reach it anytime soon, however. A speech check of 45 lets you convince him to release the hostages so the NCR can escort the cons out peacefully, which he will agree to without much of a fuss. In turn, he provides you with a signature lighter that belonged to Benny and seemed to be dropped on their journey throughout the Mojave. Returning to Monroe leads to a new problem. He's just received orders to attack the cons, hostages or not. What is it with the NCR and their willingness to let hostages die as soon as any situation gets a bit hairy? It's not like the cons are Legion either. They're considered raiders, sure, but there's more of a chance to reason with them over the Legion by a mile. This is a non-issue anyway, as you can simply convince Monroe to let them go as the plan has already been made and agreed upon. There's no checks here either. It's a pretty laid out can I go against my orders moment for Monroe, and all you need to do is say, yes, obviously you moron, you silly fool. Of course you can go against your orders here in order to save all these lives. Why would you listen to your higher-ups over this one? Okay, maybe Victor was harsh. Or maybe it isn't, since the dude had to consider if he was going to wipe out an entire group of individuals who agreed to a peaceful conclusion. That's the NCR for you. Listen to orders no matter how dumb they are until a wandering superhuman courier
that's the drop.
tell you otherwise.
Cool.
With the cons leaving and the hostages safe, we can start making our way closer to New Vegas,
terrible.
but there's a lot of hiccups along the way. First and foremost is our third run-in with Victor, who is also making his way to New Vegas. After briefly discussing what happened with the cons as well as Benny, he'll be on his way and we can choose to follow him if we want, but it's ultimately unnecessary to do so. Instead, we're going to walk north slightly to the 188 trading post just ahead, where you meet another potential companion and one of my personal favorites, Veronica. In terms of the overarching story of New Vegas in the DLC, both Eddie and Veronica have the most involvement within. Neither can actively accompany you into the DLC, in fact no companions can, but there is a similar Eddie model in Lonesome Run later, and Veronica has strong ties to an individual we will run into during Dead Money. It's really cool to see, and I will take a moment to praise how well New Vegas ties its DLC storyline into not only the base game, but between the DLCs themselves. Characters from one DLC may have had an impact on other DLC, and it's one of the most interesting aspects about them, seeing how everything weaves between one another. Veronica looks like a settler and not much else. She has a cheery personality, which is a big contrast to Boone, but there's more to her than meets the eye, and she explains that to you after offering to join you on your adventure. Veronica comes from a bunker, and she wants to see the world in order to build her own perspective of the world and societies that live within them. You can take Veronica with you by swapping out one of your human companions, but we're not going to do that just yet. Boone already has 2 history points, and he's hopefully going to get 2 more shortly after. One major line of questioning Veronica asks you about is your feelings towards the Brotherhood of Steel. It's pretty obvious that she is a member. She makes remarks about living in a bunker with a big family, all of whom can handle themselves, and even if she's not at home, there's plenty of others who can take care of themselves out there and provide. Veronica will stay here for now, but we'll be back to see what she has to offer us in terms of storytelling. New Vegas isn't in sight, but as you can probably see from the footage, there's plenty of surrounding areas to explore and plenty of quests for us to deal with before even reaching Freeside. One such area is known as the Aerotech Office Park. Here we meet Frank Weathers as well as Captain Parker. Frank has lost his family after trying to strike it rich in New Vegas. He lost them to Legion slavers after running away, something you can find out after completing an intelligence check questioning why he's alive. Captain Parker, meanwhile, has a few issues of his own. There's people going missing around the park, and there's an individual named Keith in the community both selling drugs and cheating people out of their money via rigged gambling. I potentially wouldn't even talk about these 2 quests in particular, but Franks is going to take us to Cottonwood Cove, a Legion stronghold, and Parker is going to shed further insight into what the NCR is really like. We're going to backtrack a fair bit here after agreeing to help Frank find his family. First, we're going to head all the way back to Primm so we can discuss a major feature in New Vegas: gambling. The Vicky and Vance Casino is not functional upon your first visit, but after dealing with the events there and then dealing with some NCR deserters, it does eventually become operational once more, and so now is the perfect time to discuss gambling before it's all we're doing in New Vegas proper. Gambling in New Vegas isn't fair at all. It's completely based around the player's luck stat, which is honestly a nice touch. A luck stat of around 5 probably allows you to play what feels like a fair hand of blackjack, while anything lower will see you losing more often than not. A luck luck stat of 10, however, makes you the best gambler the strip has ever seen. Players can land on 19 in blackjack and then choose to double down while still managing to get 21 somehow. It's that powerful. To offset this, players can only win so much before being permanently locked out of gambling entirely, this being true for each casino. Every functional casino in Vegas has a limit on the overall earnings a player can make and multiple checkpoints that can be reached that will ultimately interrupt your gambling so they can bestow upon you various prizes on the house. Think of high rollers getting comped food in hotel rooms. You're probably spending a lot of money there and they want to keep you doing so, as generally the house always wins. Not Mr. House though, he'll get what's coming to him. This is all good and fine until your overall earnings reach a certain positive threshold, in which a manager will run up to you and inform you that you can't gamble there any longer as you are costing the casino too much money. They may say this fairly meekishly or more aggressively depending on the casino. Generally speaking, there are 3 major choices in terms of gambling. You have slots, roulette, and blackjack. They all function as you would expect them to, and you can alter your bets based on how much you'd like to spend per game. My personal favorite to play is blackjack. I find that even without a high luck stat, you can still come out on top more often than not by playing the game at least somewhat smart, although I'm no expert on its intricacies. But New Vegas cheats you based on luck anyway, so there's only so much you can do. After taking Primm for all it's worth, it's time to head back towards Camp Searchlight and a little further east to reach Cottonwood Cove. Cottonwood Cove is a Legion's stronghold and slave camp. The only reason we weren't here earlier is because it directly relates to quests from both Camp Searchlight and the Arrow Camp. In fact, completing the Searchlight quest in a specific way, the way that we will be completing it, ultimately causes the quest with Frank to fail before we even meet him. The best course of action for this quest is to simply discover Cottonwood Cove without being detected and then teleport back to Searchlight, as Sergeant Aster will now have new dialogue for you, asking you to go plant a bug within the camp and find various pieces of intel so that they have a better idea of what is going on in there. If you're chummy with the Legion, which we're not, you can side with them and give false information to Aster, but since they are hostile on site currently and we don't really like them, we're not going to bother. After sneaking around with your abundance of stealth boys, planting a bug on their radio, and getting several pieces of intel, you can return to Aster, who thanks you for your service and a job well done. There's more you can do here, however, as you can offer to wipe out the camp for good and completely remove the Legion presence by yourself. Aster thinks you're a little crazy, but, in a good way, a little quirky death machine sort of way that the NCR really appreciates because they love killing dudes. I think there's actually a clip I have of an NCR dude being a little too on the nose when he says the streets will bleed red from anyone that disagrees with us bringing peace to the Mojave, or something along those lines. If I find it, I'll clip it here.
Nelson will serve as example. We'll bleed the ground red with anyone who opposes our peace.
There's a couple of ways you can deal with Cottonwood Cove. The most efficient way, and the one that gets you the highest praise from the NCR, is to locate a nearby radioactive truck and unload a set of radioactive barrels from it. That will irradiate the area and kill anyone in the vicinity. This, in turn, can fail the quest for Frank Weather, and is the reason we waited until now to do it. So first things first, you head into Cottonwood Cove, via stealth or not, and reach the prison where multiple slaves are being held, including Frank's family. When engaging with this family, Mrs. Weathers explains that while not ideal, being a slave is still better than being with Frank because he was both a drunk and also highly abusive to them. You can free them, but ultimately they will not go back to Frank, and you can break the news to him later. In the meantime, it's time to deal with the camp properly. Before activating the barrels, I personally like to take out the leader of the camp, as doing so while at this point in the quest should theoretically give Boone another 2 history points, meaning we only need 1 more to start his quest, and we will get it shortly after this. Once the leader is dealt with, you can drop the barrels to kill the rest of the camp and then report to Aster for an additional reward. This quest, Eye for an Eye, is interesting for multiple reasons. Most prominent is how it ties directly into another quest, and without prior knowledge or proper footwork on your part, you could essentially fail the quest by killing innocent civilians who are trapped by the Legion. There's multiple examples of this littered throughout New Vegas. Sometimes helping one faction locks you out of dealing with another. Sometimes your actions can kill people or cause consequences that will ripple in a way. They lock you out of previously available quests. It's something you have to live with, unless you're a save-scumming meta player like me by this point. I doubt this would matter to the NCR anyway, since they seem to be so gung-ho about mercy killing anyone who brushes shoulders with the Legion. We can return to the Arrowhead Park to let Frank know his family is safe, but ultimately not coming back. says he'll attempt to do so, as maybe being clean will bring his family back. I always thought that was a bit of a damaging thought process for him. There's no real guarantee that his family would come back at all after what he has done, especially with the abuse. Better for someone to move on for themselves rather than for the reunion of something he lost due to his actions. But Frank is a damaged man, and even when attempting to do the right thing, doing it for the wrong reasons kind of tracks. Now we get to deal with Parker, and oh boy, I cannot tell you how much I hate Parker. He's just one of the most spineless NCR members you'll run into during your journey. Parker has a few problems. One of those problems is a local resident named Keith, who I mentioned happened to be selling drugs and scamming people out of money via Caravan. You can go talk to Keith, and with a high enough speech check and barter check, you can get him to admit to both offenses and sell Jet to you. This isn't enough proof, however, and you need more to show he's been doing what he says he has. Luckily, there's a locked desk in one of the adjacent rooms holding his marked cards. Funnily enough, you actually lose karma for taking these. You actually lose karma for stealing from the Legion in Cottonwood Cove too. Really great mechanic you have there, guys. Once the evidence is presented to Parker, you can opt to join him in arresting Keith. Parker attempts to do so, but Keith refuses to go and insults Parker in the process, using the fact that his wife left him as ammunition. And this is where things take a weird turn. Parker doesn't simply arrest Keith here. He guns him down, an unarmed man, before simply walking off and being done with it. You can bring this up to Parker, pointing out he killed a man in cold blood simply for insulting him. He simply blames Keith for pushing his buttons, claims no one will miss him anyway, and pays you for your services. What the hell is going on with the NCR that is allowing this kind of conduct to happen? Genuine question.
Ow.
We've seen a lot of questionable things on
I'm going to bed.
but killing someone in cold blood, someone you were to arrest,
I don't think
there's
anyone's here anymore,
unfortunately
but,
nothing
you know,
for you to
go to
do
bed.
about it. Even if you could mention it
Good
to
night.
another NCR
Thanks for
member
watching.